Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 4Corners podcast. I'm Brad, joined as always by Matt and Shad. Gentlemen, how are you doing on this fallish day?
Well, I haven't
Good.
fallen down, so I call it a good thing.
So funny you should mention that. I did not hurt myself, but I missed a step getting my drink for the show and fell on my side, which I think that broke a solid 1.5 year streak of not falling.
Did you actually really fall?
Oh yeah, I fell. I mean, it was on carpet, and I knew I was going down, so I took it on the hip, and I didn't hurt myself, but I did fall.
You pulled a Bobby Eaton, you just took it all in the
hip.
Right on the hip, man.
But I have really bad arthritis below the knee, like in my ankles and my feet and my toes, and I'm flat-footed, so I kind of slide around to begin with, and if I start going, I don't have the mobility anymore to stop myself. Because things are a little too locked up to really save myself. So if I feel I'm going, I usually just go with it, because the times I've tried to save myself, I hurt myself worse.
I'll just take the I still wrestle with my kids, so still nowhere near what it was, but I'm still taking bumps every now and then. So.
I'm good. I am good like in the summer, and like when the weather is like above a certain temperature, I'm totally fine. But winter and stuff, I start having some trouble.
For me, it's just whenever the winter shifts, I'm jacked up. But.
And I could do better if I keep good control of my diet. It goes down.
Yeah.
You know, I had that.
I get the
rheumatism,
the Raynaud's, like I think that's like Raynaud's syndrome, where my fingers just get like absolutely numb, and they'll turn like white and like they become useless, which it's annoying, but it's fine, except that a lot of times like I have to wear gloves, especially if I'm out for a while, because I'll get like I've heard some even say like lesions, which is like, that's a weird way to put it. It's really, I get like the cracks in my fingernails. The problem is that my fingers will get dry and cracked, and they'll get so bad that it becomes like bloody painful.
Yeah, I get that.
Which I do a job that I'm typing all day. So that's like literally like I'll be typing all day, and I have these like fissures in my fingertips.
Ooh.
And so it's not pleasant. It's like,
I get that, and my knuckles bleed. When I worked in warehouses, it was terrible. I actually didn't. Last year was the first time. I didn't even do anything. I didn't have trouble with it last year, and that was like the first time in forever. But I used to have trouble with my hand getting cold and my fingertips being numb. But carpal tunnel surgery fixed me right up on that end. So before we hit the show, we have a shout out. So this is friend of the channel. He's promoted my channel. He's promoted the show for us. So this is Brockster Builds. He has a channel on YouTube, and he does a lot of stuff on Twitch. He plays Phil Singer games on Twitch and does some like game stuff. But he is having what is a skinathon on Friday, and he's shooting for a 24-hour stream. So it's Brockster Builds on Twitch. There is going to be prizes, and what the skinathon is there is a game that some Twitch streamers do, which is called Stream Raiders, where you can like do like kind of a little game together, and he sells skins for some of his characters. So check that out. You can donate. He has prizes, especially if you like bootleg Phil Singer games cards. He's going to be giving some of those out, and he does some good stuff. Like I said, he's been a friend of the channel, and I just want to give him a shout out.
Cool.
But tonight we are doing a Halloween themed show. We're going to be competing with Dynamite, so I expect this to be a low-key episode anyway. But so pretty much we're going to be talking about Monster Heels in the main event. We're going to be talking about our favorite Halloween Halloween special. I'm expecting that just to be an excuse to talk about the Peanuts Halloween special, but we will see. And then our first event of the night, though, is a special game. So this is pretty much Would You Rather. The idea here is it's going to be pretty much a movie monster, and you have to pick which one you'd rather take your chances with. I said which one would you rather be in a movie with, so it's which one would you rather have to deal with, try to survive, like being attacked by or hunted by.
Question: are we like self-aware? Not that like, oh, we're in a movie, but like we're not just like dumb like many of the other horror movie tropes are, like where people are just like, and I there's even like it's kind of commonplace to the point where I saw like the other day I saw like a viral, maybe it was on TikTok or something. It was like a viral trope where it's like a girl being chased by a masked guy in the woods, and she runs into like a fork in the road, and one direction it goes like to total safety, the other one to you will be murdered. And she like looks and it's like, and she runs down the murder path, and the guy in the video, the mass killer just stops and he goes, "What? Come on, like you're like, how dumb are you?"
I watched the entire Friday the 13th 2 years ago, and I've watched a bunch of slashers since then, and a lot of the tropes people make fun of are not true at all. Like the black guy never dies first.
Doesn't always die. Doesn't always die first.
I can think of maybe like one or two instances where it's happened, but like the vast majority of the time that's not true. And usually the girl that gets away isn't like necessarily stupid. Like a lot of the people are dumb, but they're also drunk.
So it's not true in that series.
No, across other ones, like
where...
if you look at like the first Halloween, like Jamie Lee Curtis is actually pretty smart in that one.
Yeah, that's why she's the final girl.
Like the final girl is usually smart, and other people don't even necessarily do dumb things.
Or they do. Matt, I saw another version like what you were talking about. I think it was a Progressive commercial. It was like, "Oh man, what are we gonna do?" And like the teenagers run through the woods, and like, we could hop into that running car, or we could run into the hatch filled with chainsaws hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah.
Run in there, and the killer's like, "Huh."
Well, like if you take Nightmare on Elm Street, like they're all just fucked to begin with because he's gonna get you no matter what. But like Friday the 13th, they're usually drunk.
I mean, the answer to Friday the 13th is just don't go to the place that everyone says is haunted because you're like, oh, what's it? It's like, just don't go there. You know?
Yeah. I will say the horror movie tropes of the dumb idiots who always choose the worst possible option. That was essentially the premise of Tucker and Dale versus Evil that we saw. Like that was the premise where like everyone is acting like a complete idiot, except for Tucker and Dale, who actually are innocent and good-hearted people. But these idiots just keep doing things so stupidly that they're literally like killing themselves. And Tucker and Dale, are just like horrified by it.
I think the best part is like
person.
All these college kids showed up at our property and just started killing themselves. It's like, well, it is accurate.
Yeah, I think it's like some sort of suicide cult. Like, what's going on?
Mighty ho, officer, we've had us a doozy of a day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Katrina Bowden's not stupid either, but she's really unlucky.
So you can be self-aware. Sometimes it can be like, well, I'm screwed anyway, but like I might have a better chance in these circumstances than like another one. Or it can be just as simple as I would rather die by the circumstances that this thing is going to kill me. Because the first one I think is going to be I would rather die by the circumstances of how it's going to kill me. So the first one is the alien xenomorph versus predator. And like I'm just going to say straight off the bat,
it's like we're giving a choice. We're giving a choice of like who.
Which would you rather be in the movie with?
Yeah, which would you rather take your chances again? So for me, it's like, yeah, I'm probably going to die, but I'd rather the predator just straight up murder me than have a chest burster come out of my...
Oh yeah, it's 100% Predator.
It's absolutely Predator, because Predator at least like would just kill you quickly, and it's like, yeah, maybe it would like take your spine and his skull as like a trophy, but
you'd be dead.
At least it's like he's gonna shoot you or he's gonna cut your head off or something, and like you're gonna die quick. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, that sucks, but I mean I'm dead. Versus like let some sort of evil, demonic, like alien creature like spit acid and bind me to a wall while an embryo gets implanted that then eats its way out of me.
I would rather
I don't want that.
I'd rather go down quick and clean than have to go down to the metaphor for sexual assault 8 days out of 7, you know? And the other thing with the Predator is if you ain't got anything on you, he ain't gonna bother because you ain't interesting game.
Well, I think the other thing to consider
Yeah.
too is like a predator, you're probably in an open area in the woods, so at least you have room to maneuver
Mm.
with. If you're stuck with a xenomorph, you're probably on a ship and you're just hosed.
Yeah. Oh,
Or
yeah.
someplace that has like enclosed structures that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
difficult to escape from. Uh, the funny to me, like still the funniest one of the funnier gags that's enduring, but from Spaceballs, when the xenomorph bursts out of like the one guy's skull, not skull, his chest, and he goes, "Hello, my baby, hello," like decently,
Yeah,
and starts singing ragtime. I'm
but
like,
you know what the best part about that though
That's fine.
is that's John Hurt, who was the original guy. Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
but it ruins it though because then
he goes like, "Oh no, not this again." It's like,
no, but the problem with that scene though is it's hilarious, but it ruins Alien because then you go back and watch it and you're like, yeah, he is a little showboating bitch when he pops out.
yeah, he is.
So supposedly,
Hey, everyone. It's like,
supposedly with Alien, they didn't know. Like, so when that chest burster thing happened, like they didn't know that's exactly how it was going to go down.
Yeah.
And like all the blood and stuff, but
Yeah. Supposedly most of the crew did not know how that scene was going to go.
yeah, that
But-
happened, I guess, in The Descent. If you've never seen The Descent, the women that were like the characters didn't see didn't see the monsters until like it was time to actually see it, and I guess they freaked the fuck out and all ran away screaming. Which is a good movie. If you haven't seen it, The Descent is an underrated
It's
gem
very
of a
good.
modern classic.
Yeah.
And honestly, the
I-
monsters aren't even the scariest part. Like the claustrophobia of them in the caves is pretty intense before you get to the monsters.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, I can assume I can appreciate how they were. I'm sorry to cut you out, Shad. I'm sure I can appreciate how they were scared because even if you, this will many times in like complete daylight or well lit, like I'll come around the corner if my wife is like right there because like she happens to like be coming down the hall or something like that. It's like like because you aren't expecting that, let alone somebody in like a complete like monstrous costume just like appearing out of the darkness. I'd be like probably scared too.
Yeah, and I mean,
can
if you take it
appreciate-
as a real life event, like people don't understand what like true darkness is until you've been like I've been in a cave before and they turned the lights out. Like there's a different level of darkness when you're in a cave with no semblance of any light anywhere. Like it is, you have no concept of what like true darkness is until you're in that. Shad is nodding his head. I think he's been in the same situation.
Mammoth Cave.
Yep, I've been. That's right.
And they
That's where I
and
went.
they shut it off, and you stand there a minute, and you go, like your entire nervous system freaks out, and you're like, oh god,
Yeah.
oh god, what is? Nope, nope, nope. Do not like.
Yeah,
Like all of the sensory input you're used to is now useless.
Yep. Mammoth Cave.
Well,
is
yeah,
where
'cause
I went
we're-
to.
Yeah, as human beings, we're very visual. Like vision is arguably like our primary sense. And yeah, like I've never been to Mammoth Cave, never heard of it, but I've been to Luray Caverns in Virginia. Like once when I was like young, so this is like 30 years ago or more, but they did the same thing. So they got you to like a point in the cave and it's like, now we'll show you what it's like without light. And they turned the lights off and it's like, I wasn't particularly scared,
I wasn't either.
but thinking back on it, it was like, oh man, I'm so screwed if like if the lights just stayed off. I'd be like, oh boy.
Yep.
Because he tried to scramble in the dark trying to find an exit, and it's like, good
So
luck.
I have some friends that one of them on their property there's a cave on his family's property, and he's gone spelunking in it before, and I went with him once, and I was just like, you know what? Nope. I went as far as I was gonna, and I'm like, nah, my leg is killing me, and everything is too small. There is nothing about this I'm comfortable with. So, I rolled my way back out. And there were some of them that went back again, and one of them, he was looking at something, and the group split up. And so he's like, I know they're both coming back, so he just stayed put, and then his headlamp started to go out. And he was just like, never doing this again, ever. Nope, 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 nope.
I did it
So
once, and I never feel the need to do it again. Like it's cool
no,
and everything, but it's a lot. And I think
yeah,
people don't understand. Like if you're out at night and you have some moon, like you actually like can see quite a bit if you're outside long enough. Like it's not like really that dark.
just let your eyes adjust and you'll be
Yeah.
okay. But no, that and the story of the Nutty Putty Cave, it's just like I'm never going in an unexplored cave again.
Yeah.
So
Not a good
What's
idea.
that Nutty Putty Cave?
so it's this story. These two guys, they like to explore caves, and one of them thought he was going in this particular area, so he was trying to inch his way through this hard pass, but he was head down, and it was tighter than the one he thought he was going into. And
Oh,
every time he'd breathe
yeah.
out, he'd slip a little further, and it's just like, dear God, he couldn't even.
That's the one where like he just died that way, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't aware that it was two
A
guys,
nightmare
and I guess I didn't
fuel.
know.
So
Yeah.
speaking of nightmare fuel, our next one is Jason versus Freddy. I think this is another easy one.
Oh, for me, Jason,
Yeah.
because I mean,
You can't get away from Freddy.
you can't get away from Freddy. You fall asleep like you're dead, and everyone has to fall asleep at some point. But
Yeah.
I think was it Shatter that you said earlier? It's like it's easy just because like oh just don't go to the area.
Yeah.
Like,
Jason is
don't go to
territorial.
Camp Lake. You're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. He kind of just likes hanging out where he well was murdered or died.
Jason
He drowned.
Jason
Go there.
is out of all the movie slashers, Jason Voorhees is the boomer. He wants everybody off his lawn. And so don't get on Jason's lawn, and he ain't got much cause.
Well, and he's content in just killing you, whereas like Freddy
Yeah.
is gonna like
Freddy
gonna,
wants to torture you.
and get his one-liner off.
Welcome to prime time.
Speaking of, I've watched both series, and I think Nightmare on Elm Street is like a stronger concept overall. But God, did those movies just go too far? And after the third one, and like Friday the 13th was, I would say it never hit the heights of like the first Nightmare on Elm Street, but like it stayed consistent longer in my opinion.
Yeah. I think the first Nightmare on Elm Street is legit like a scary movie.
Like him walking
extent
down that alley and just like running
Yeah.
his claws on the fence and
And the concept is good too, but certainly by like the third, it all became about, how many like teenagers or young people are gonna die and what really funny
yeah.
like death or interesting deaths is Freddy gonna do and what like witty one-liners
Yeah.
is he gonna throw. It became almost like they became almost like comedies.
I would say camp.
Whereas Friday the 13th, while kind of ridiculous at points too, and they kind of fall into like let's see what gruesome death we can do. Jason still was played straight. I mean, and realistically, what Jason in part 4 he dies, like legit dies, whether he
Yeah.
was really completely human before then.
But
like
he
the
doesn't even
first-
get the
the
mask
first-
until the third movie.
Yeah, but if he was like kind of human, then he dies in the fourth one. It's just that he gets resurrected, and then ever since like part 6, he's essentially some sort of like zombie revenant thing.
Yeah. I think Revenant's a better term.
Yeah. Which if you ever saw like I think part 9, like Jason Lives, it kind of implies that it's because the dark magic from the Necronomicon actually like is partly
Yeah.
involved. Like I don't know if you consider that canon or not. But that's have either of you seen the remakes they did of Nightmare on Elm Street and
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Friday the 13th? I thought neither was particularly good. I
can't-
thought that
You can't replace
it-
you can't replace Robert Englund. That's the biggest problem with Freddy.
you
couldn't-
can't.
He brings such a.
it-
It is well, like the problem is like Freddy is Robert Englund, like, so you can't really replace him. Like no one has. So he has a certain Joker vibe. Like no one can pull off being kind of. No one can pull off kind of being funny while also being terrifying.
Mhm. Yeah, I did think they had Jackie Earl Haley play Freddy, and it was played straight, where it's like he's just a monster,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting, but it wasn't that good of a film. And the Friday the 13th remake, I didn't think was good, but the thing I did like about it kind of was that Jason was they didn't this wasn't really like a zombie revenant like it was more like just like a insane, like completely inhuman in terms of like morality or whatever, like living human being. But they portrayed him almost like if Jason was like a special ops soldier that went wrong. He just was out and he would kill people. He was like no nonsense. And
Yeah.
he moved. What I liked about it is he moved in a way that it was like almost like a precision, where it's like he was there to kill people when he wanted to kill you, and he's not screwing around about it. Like he was gonna kill you. And it wasn't like wasted motion where he's just like fumbling around like a goofball. It was like he was serious, and I did like that aspect of it, but it was not that good of a film.
Well,
I think they were trying to remake it again, but it just didn't. No one wanted to buy it.
I think if you're playing Freddy straight, you're doing it wrong. Like if you're trying to play him 100% serious, like that's not Freddy the character. Like they went too far in one direction, but like I think part of what makes the early Freddy like kind of terrifying is he's not like taking it seriously. Like he's kind of being a little goofy about it, which I think makes him scarier because it's like, oh, like he's kind of got like a Joker quality to him.
He doesn't have anything to worry about, so he can afford to take his time with it and that sort of stuff.
He's having fun with it. I think that's what makes him terrifying.
Yes, because if you can afford to take the time to do it and you're going to get off on it like that, then that does make it worse.
And Dream Warriors has a great song to it because it's a Dawkins song. And then Johnny Depp also makes his acting debut and dies horribly in a fountain of blood in the first movie.
Yeah, that's a heck of a visual.
Maybe I'll rewatch those for my Halloween watch. I was doing the Dead series for my early. Not the remakes. I don't like the remakes as much. I was doing like the original ones.
The Evil Dead.
The
Evil Dead.
No. Like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. You know those.
I actually like the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead with
don't.
Tony Todd.
I don't.
I liked it. It's not the best to me, but I enjoyed it. I like Tony Todd.
It wasn't terrible, but it doesn't have the charm of the first one for me.
I think Tom Savini directed that one.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I watched a I can't think of his name. Joe Bob Briggs episode that they did with the Night of the Living Dead, and it had like Sven Gulli on it, and they're talking about the first one, and that it being public domain and how they ended up with it in public domain probably actually helped George Romero and like the kind of the pop culture like gravitas that Living Dead got because it was so seen, because it was so easy to get out there and put on TV and stuff. Good flick if you've never seen it.
The original.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not nearly as gory.
It has its moments. A lot of them are still alive,
Yeah,
but sadly the main character passed away, I think, in the 90s.
He's passed away. It was actually kind of I guess groundbreaking for the time because it was an African American who was the protagonist.
Yeah.
You know, and presented very competently and you know, as a true hero, a true heroic character, which at the time, obviously, because it was the 60s, right?
Yeah.
I think it was, yeah. So, which was like that was still kind of not.
And the way
really
he died
like,
was
I mean,
kind of.
You had some.
There was some social commentary to the way he was killed too.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
But it's a really good movie, and yeah, that was subversive in its in its own way.
Obviously in a positive way,
Yeah.
because it's
It's
advocating
well,
for more rights for people. So
to modern Hollywood, that's how you do subversion. Okay,
Subtlety? What?
so we're gonna go to our next one. You can take this as generic or the individual characters, but it would be Dracula or the Wolfman. And I have a very strong opinion on this one.
I mean,
oh,
Matt, say the line.
what? Oh, Wolfman's got nards? Or
There it is.
Yeah.
What? Oh, you just kick him in those nards and I
Yeah.
would choose Wolfman. And the reason why is like, I mean, I feel like Dracula and vampires have become so like flanderized nowadays. But if you actually kind of read like the actual Dracula, or if you see like Nosferatu, which is basically it's just an adaptation of Dracula.
It's Dracula,
But
but they
changing,
changed
like-
everything because they didn't have the rights. Actually, I think
They didn't have the right, so
there's a really funny story about that. So, Bram Stoker's wife threw an absolute shit fit about that movie, and it was supposed to be destroyed, but somehow copies of it survived.
For Nosferatu?
Yep. She threw an absolute shit fit about that, and I think she won in court, and they were supposed to get rid of it, but someone either smuggled a copy out or it had already come across to like America at the time.
Yeah. You can tell Americans, hey, you can't have this anymore. Somebody's going to find a way to keep one.
Yeah,
Like,
because again,
It's going to be tucked away somewhere.
Joe Bob Briggs on his Shudder show had it on, and that one was really good because so they had like a properly restored copy where they corrected the frames on it. So if you don't know, if you watch a really old movie and they're like walking super fast and stuff, that's because older movies ran at like a slower frame rate with the older cameras, but when they play them now, they're essentially running in like 1.25 time because they're running them at like what a normal frame rate is. But so when he did it, they set the frame rate back to what it should be, so it looks proper the way they move. But so yeah, it should not exist because it's essentially an unauthorized telling, and
So I've got a reference on hand right now that the studio was sued by Stoker's estate. The courts ordered all copies to be burned, but the slipping through the cracks was coming to the U.S., which didn't recognize most foreign copyright claims until decades later. It's like, oh, what's that? No, not us. Never mind.
so technically it should be lost media.
It should be.
Yep.
In
And
parts of the world, it is.
And I think the second she was dead, like they started passing it around again, and we're like, oh yeah, fuck this bitch, she's gone. Like she dead, let's watch it.
okay.
Well, so when the U.S. recognized the foreign copyright claim, the original book had passed into public domain, so there couldn't be a claim on it anymore. And they're just like, "Oh, you wanted a copy of it? Yeah, here you go. Have some copies. Let's do this."
Yeah, it's not a good book, FYI. If you want to read a book that the Universal monsters are based on, that's far better written than Bram Stoker's Dracula. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is 1,000 times better as a book than Dracula.
Frankenstein's good.
Dracula is weird because isn't Dracula written almost like his like
It's written
as
as
series of
letters from all the
letters?
different characters.
Yeah.
I appreciate that that device.
It's just a dry
but-
read.
And Frankenstein is not a dry read. It's
very modern.
Very much
She had a like Mary Shelley had a real and the funny story about Frankenstein, and they've kind of told it before. So Frankenstein was born out of they were vacationing in Germany, and it came out of a bet to see who could write like the best ghost story over like a very snowy winter, and that's how Frankenstein was born. But
Yeah.
Movies actually don't do Frankenstein justice, so I just reread it last year. And
yeah.
Frankenstein in the book is terrifying. Like absolutely
because-
terrifying because you can see his organs, like he has these milky white eyes. Like he is a terrifying apparition.
And he
of him.
is very intelligent too.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that makes him so scary is that like visually he's repugnant, but he's also very smart, very capable, and very, very strong.
And I think what makes him most terrifying is so on the reread I'm like, Frankenstein, well, no, the monster, I think he had a name. I can't remember that.
Adam.
Adam. Okay, so
Adam.
Adam, what makes him so terrifying is he has a point. Like, he's kind of right in his grievances. He's just, goes about them in a very bad way. But, like, his grievances are pretty right about what he did. And I don't even think, I don't even think the the bride request was that unreasonable of him.
No, but that came out of Victor's just basically his trauma response. He's like, I did this once, and then he freaks out in doing it, and he's like, I can't do it again. Amusingly, the way I remember the monster's name was from running a Deadlands campaign. And he is he is statted out in here. He is what is he?
Interesting.
He's challenge rating 9, except he doesn't stay dead. So, anyway, sorry. What were you gonna say, Matt?
It wasn't the reason, if I recall, and I could be recalling incorrectly, but didn't like part of why Frankenstein actually freaked out was because like he thought how horrific it would be if like the bride and Frankenstein's monster actually like. It was never kind of established that they could, but it was like if they consummated and had
it's very
race of these species, that he would be like it would be too terrifying.
It was a very eugenics point of view that Frankenstein took.
Yeah,
I would say the monster's request wasn't that unreasonable because his point is kind of right. Yeah. Frankenstein screwed around and then abandoned him.
Yeah.
And and if you want the most accurate retelling of Frankenstein, the Al Pacino movie is the most accurate to the book.
Did Al Pacino do Frankenstein or Robert De Niro?
Oh shit, it might be Robert De Niro. I get them intermixed sometimes.
I think it's De Niro.
Yeah, it might. It's Robert De Niro, I think. I get them mixed up sometimes. Yeah, I haven't seen that movie in forever.
I don't know if any like actual media has given like essentially what like an actual interpretation of what the monster is supposed to look like based upon the book. Because he was also in the book, he was also described as being like ridiculously large. I don't mean just like 6'4" or however.
No, he was like
tall
8
he was,
feet
Boris
tall.
Karloff. He's supposed to be like clearly of an inhuman size. Like human beings do not get that big.
Well, yeah, he built him out of bigger parts because it would be easier to do the work.
I would say
the line, by the way, from the book, Victor ponders whether they could reproduce a race of devils that would be propagated upon the earth, who might make the very existence of the species of man a condition precarious and full of terror. So,
I would say, so the 1994, I think it was, movie is not a terrible representation of him. I would actually say the Christopher Lee one from the Hammer movies, like, he shouldn't be green, but I think they kind of get it right in how he looks. They're kind of
I would
in
have
the
to
ballpark.
go back and look. Yeah.
But I think
I should.
I don't think you could quite get it. I don't think it's a hard thing to get right, I think, visually.
Yeah.
And I honestly think if you did it true to what the book would look like, I think people would be so disgusted by it that the movie would bomb.
Maybe. I'm regretting it, but like 15 years or more ago, I know on Amazon they sold it. It was like a box set of basically all the Hammer horror films. And it wasn't. I never bought it because it was like wasn't cheap. It wasn't like even like back then it was expensive. It was like $200 or something. It was like a large amount.
I
was
remember.
Like,
I know what site you're
no,
talking about.
Yeah, got it because that would have been awesome because some of those Hammer films are like amazing. Like they still hold up to this day, in my opinion.
They're
like just
really
really well done. Like the ambience, like the atmosphere.
they're really frustrating to get them all, and like it's really frustrating to get them all like in the same media together. Like it's you can't find them all on Blu-ray together. Like there's always one missing. Like you can't go on Amazon and get them all like for streaming because like one or two are missing. Like it's really frustrating like
Yeah.
to get, or like you can get them all, but they're going to be like, oh well, I'm going to have a couple of Blu-rays, I'm going to have a DVD, I'm going to have one on streaming. It's really frustrating
Yeah.
to do. But I love the
I
Hammer movies.
I know like back in the day, like Turner Classic Movies would play a lot of them during like October, but I haven't watched like Turner Classic Movies in a long time.
I think
I think they probably I don't even know that they even do like old stuff like that anymore.
I think IFC played them a lot too back in the day. So that is it for the game. That is your three choices. Oh wait, no,
I didn't get to
I would
answer
have
the
chosen
last
Wolfman.
Oh yeah. So you said Wolfman.
I would have chosen Wolfman.
one. The difficulty.
Yeah, because I think if
Go
Dracula,
ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
Dracula, I think done right, and they've remade Nosferatu, which is it's
I
Dracula.
don't care.
But I saw like the trailer, and it's like that's well, I mean, I would almost want to go see it because it's like that's done right, where it's like it's terrifying because it's essentially this undead entity with extreme power is coming, and it's not just like, oh, he's gonna like turn a person into a vampire, one person at a time into a vampire. It's like it's presented as that he brings like plague and death wherever he goes.
Yeah.
And you just see like a line of like coffins, and it's like, yeah, because he's bringing like plague and everything. So it's like him coming. It's almost like he's a biological weapon that's about to cause and has started to cause like massive destruction to wherever he lands. And it's like that's really kind of how it's done or should be done. So yeah, I would choose
The thing is,
the
though,
Wolfman, that I could like I'm just gonna not go out at night in the full moon.
the thing
I'm
is
just gonna stay
though,
in my house.
the thing is though, in the book, because I'm gonna say Dracula is who I'd want to deal with. In the book, Dracula is very dumb and he's actually very ineffectual. And the only reason he gets by as long as he does is because they don't know what's going on. Once they have him figured out, like they pretty much dispatch with him with relative ease because he's not smart. He's behind the times. Like he goes to run back to Transylvania and he's going across like with all these like old school styles of transportation, and they just take like a train and they beat him by like 3 days. Like he's not smart. He's not savvy. He doesn't plan very well. He just kind of willy-nilly kills people. Like on the boat, like if they had any like ability to get away or like wherewithal, like he wouldn't have gotten away with that. Like he was such a sloppy bitch when he did the boat killing. Like he's like, and the other thing with why I would pick Dracula is if you know it's a vampire, like he's not a threat. Like you can keep him away. Like a wolfman. Well, one, I'd rather get bitten than get mauled. But like you can only do so much with a wolfman versus a vampire, and I think the vampire is easier to keep at bay. And like I said, Dracula's kind of dumb. Like when you come down to like he's arrogant, he has his abilities, but he's overconfident and he's really just a sloppy bitch in his work.
For me, I need like the codification of what the rules for each one are because they change so much.
The universal, we'll just go based on the universal, like this, we'll call.
So that means you have to have silver to deal with werewolves, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I feel like you have more tools for dealing with Dracula than you do with a werewolf. You're also dealing with my favorite way that I had someone pontificate on the difference is werewolves are all about the frightening ferocity of nature, and vampires are about the corrupting seduction of man. And so Dracula being like, oh yes, now I am going to assert my authority, and it's just like, you know what, dude? Well, I mean, in the book, they didn't even have to stake him; they just stabbed him through the heart, and he was done. It's like, I'm Yeah, I'm not to be whatever, but I'm a little bit of a I'm probably qualify as a little bit crazy. I can get to a weapon in my house with it 2 steps, 2 or 3 steps, depending on what room I'm in. It's like, the sharp thing to the heart, I could pull that one off.
You just have to put garlic around your house, and he's screwed.
Yeah. Oh, but if it's Vampire Garfield, then you put raisins around your neck, and he won't attack you then.
Yeah.
But there are according to the folklore there are many more ways to deal with a vampire. A handful of rice at him, and he's got to sit and count them all. And then while he's counting up, here's my favorite example of the difference is from doing a Weird West thing. If you take 12 gauge to werewolf, you'll knock it down and it'll get back up. If you take 12 gauge to vampire, it'll fall over, and then you got some time to get your stake out and like whittle down a point. If he starts to get back up, you put the other barrel in him and he falls back down. You're like, yeah, now we can do this. Thunk. Uh, because 12 gauge buckshot to the head is going to put most stuff on its back.
Underrated film is Dracula Dead and Loving It.
I've heard about that one, but I haven't ever watched it.
It's funny.
That's with Leslie Nielsen, right?
Yeah, there's a scene where where Mina they stake her, and it's Steven Weber is Jonathan Harker, I think, but she just sprays blood everywhere, like just ridiculous. And he's like, "Oh, she's still alive." He does it again. He's like, "I think she's still alive." He's like, "She's dead enough, okay?" And he's just covered in blood. It's a solid film. Okay, so that is our. So you're going vampire, Shad?
Yeah.
I just think there's more.
You pocket sand vampires. You throw a big fistful of sand at them. It's like, oh god, I have to sit here and count all of them. Pocket sand, cha cha cha.
Well, I think there's more rules for dealing with a vampire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think either you've seen this underrated werewolf movie, but Dog Soldiers. Oh, you never heard of this?
No.
I've heard of it, but you got to remember, I'm not a horror movie guy, so I've heard of a bunch of these, but I haven't watched them.
I'm sure I'm positive it's on one of the streaming services, but it's not that hard to find. Like Dog Soldiers, at this point, it's probably like a 15, 20-year-old film. Let me look it up. I think one of the main characters is like Sean Pertwee. Wow, 2002. So that's like Neil Marshall, who has done a bunch of other like stuff, even some genre stuff. So Sean Pertwee.
Is Sean Pertwee related to Doctor Who? Jim Pertwee or John Pertwee? Ah,
yes.
Okay.
Awesome. That is his son. And Sean Pertwee has been in a bunch of stuff. He's like older now. He's like 60 now, but he's been in stuff. He was probably most recently in Gotham. He played Arthur in the Gotham show.
Supposedly the Penguin show is really good. I need to watch it.
That's an interesting show in itself. The first season was not good. Season was okay. The fifth season just fell off a cliff, like terrible. But
supposedly, Matt, the Penguin is really good.
I've heard that, but I haven't watched it, and I actually haven't seen the Robert Pattinson Batman film, so I want to watch that. And then watch Penguin. I've heard because they're making a sequel to that, the Batman.
Yeah.
And I think like the rumor is that like the Council of Owls is going to be like the villain.
Hopefully it's better than Joker 2.
Joker 2.
I refuse to
I've
call
heard
it.
that that's garbage.
I refuse to call it by their pretentious name. It got a D on Cinema Score, which is really difficult to do.
It was a film that didn't need like a sequel, but anyway, Dog Soldiers, that's well worth your time. It's only I think an hour. I guess it's almost like an hour 45, but it's a really good kind of modern take on werewolves, and it has an interesting werewolf design. It's pretty cool. So I would recommend the film. It's at this point it's over a 20-year-old film. I didn't realize it was that old, but it's really well done.
I just had that with something recently where what was it? I think someone was talking about being 25 or something, or I was like, oh, that was 18 years ago. Jeez.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like getting old.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so our next topic of the night is I should have made more of this. That was actually a fun game. Okay, so this is kind of it can be our favorite Halloween movies or our favorite Halloween specials. I would say not just like a straight up like horror movie, but like a Halloween based film.
Um, you've made this difficult for me because
Hold on. Can you repeat that again? Because I was like sending you guys a picture of the
Okay.
dog soldiers.
So it is your favorite Halloween like based movie or special for a movie, preferably not just like a straight up horror movie, but something that is kind of like a bit Halloweenish. And like
Hmm. So not necessarily horror, but something that is
something like
like Halloween
Monster
themed that they
Squad
would.
could probably get by on being Halloweenish.
I love Monster Squad. I know we reviewed it last year,
It doesn't even necessarily have to be
but
horror because like Hocus Pocus would count as like a Halloween movie because that like if you ask my mom like Hocus Pocus would be her favorite. Like I actually need to text her because I was gonna see if she wanted to go see it because it's gonna be in theaters in a week or so for a week.
so here's my problem.
Mhm.
One of my all-time favorite movies doesn't have it's not a horror movie, it doesn't have anything to do with Halloween, but the vibe to it feels like it kind of fits.
Okay, that'll count. Just throw it out there. We can work with it.
Clue.
Say that again.
I
Oh,
love
Clue.
Clue.
Okay.
That some people are like, Tim Curry is at his best in Rocky Horror. I think Tim Curry is at his best in Clue. I love that movie. It's like everything in it works right. It all comes together great. The endings are fantastic. Like I love the whole thing. And it's the whole like whodunit sense of dread on top of the goofy comedy. Just absolutely hits home for
I
me.
respect the fact that there wasn't like a canonical ending to that movie until they did like a home video release to put it on
Mm.
TV. Because like
Yeah.
when it came out, like if you don't know, so when it came out, like you could go to a different theater and get a different ending. There were, I think, an ending for each character having done it, and they distributed the different endings out to different theaters. So um, different places had a different killer essentially.
It wasn't each character didn't have an ending, but there were different characters having different endings.
I think there were like
And
5 maybe endings.
I would say at most there's 4. I can think of 3 off the top of my head. But the truth is it doesn't matter. It's the
No,
way the endings are done are excellent, and 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1, and everybody in it's doing a great job. It's really tightly written. It's if you want to adapt a game into a movie, I just say you go watch Clue
Mhm.
and learn and take notes on how to do it right.
I'm kind of
Don't
surprised.
give me Battleship or some crap.
I'm kind of surprised that it's fallen off the radar because there was a time in the 90s where it was on TV a good deal, and it feels like I don't know. There was like a shift somewhere, and they just like people just weren't as interested in showing it because Comedy
I
Central
think
used to play it like Comedy Central used to play it all the time.
Yeah.
it might be a little bit generational because my wife and I have a friend. He just turned like 40, so he's a little bit younger than like my wife and I. But he had, I guess, never seen Clue until like the last few years, and it's quickly actually, Chad, become like one of his favorite movies, to the point where on his 40th birthday, his wife is like actually like an event planner, so like she had
Hmm.
kind of like a connection, but there was like a small-ish space that is in Washington DC that like she was able to basically like, because she like, again, she knows the owners, she works with them, and like she was able to rent it out. I'm sure
Mhm.
probably at like a discount. And it's not a huge space. It's probably not much bigger than like someone's one level home. Like it's not a huge space. But she rented the place out and he threw like a Clue themed murder mystery birthday party, which is actually fun. And it's like it was really more just like get friends together. Like you
Yeah.
dressed in one of the colors. Like, you know, someone could be like you need to wear like, mustard to be Colonel Mustard. Like it was themed like that. But because
Yeah.
he loved it. He absolutely like loved the movie Clue. And he just saw it like in the last like 5 years, I think. But it's quickly like moved up the charts as is one of his favorite movies. By the way,
Top five for me.
I just looked this up because I remember seeing this in the news, but I guess there was a movie that came out recently called Stream, Stream, not Scream, Stream, and I think it was a horror film. I'm not sure, but I guess it came out recently. But the point is like, it was the return to the big screen by Tim Curry. He actually had like a part in it, which I'm
Wow.
actually very happy for because for those who aren't aware, like Tim Curry had a stroke a few years back, like actually
Really
like over a
bad.
decade ago, but he is
Yeah.
a bad one where it's debilitating and he's not done
He's
a lot of
he
stuff
did
since then.
he did. So I reread Dracula. I did it as an audiobook, and he read the Helsing parts. And I was really excited
Mm.
for it, but it was I don't know if it was post stroke, but it was towards the end, and he really struggles. Like it's still him, but like you can hear him like
It could have been post-stroke then.
because he's like you can feel like the struggle to like talk. And like they
Yeah.
can't
Mhm.
cover it up in post and stuff, and I was just like, oh man, like you
Yeah.
could just tell like it wasn't him at his best, and made me sad.
I have not got to see it yet. I know someone has to have a copy somewhere.
And
But the first Broadway run of Spam-A-Lot had Tim Curry as Arthur. And it's like, I've
Mhm.
got to see this.
and the other reason I know he wasn't in good
He
shape though is I've seen him in some absolutely horrendous dog shit, and he gives it. He has given some really bad movies more than they deserve, like performance wise.
I was just gonna say that. Like he is underrated because if you actually sit down and think about his body of work, and he's done a ton of stuff, ton. Think about the body of work and actually sit down and look at everything he's done, or take individual things that he's done, even if it's a crap movie, and think to yourself, it's like, well, this movie may be crap, but how is his performance? And I dare say, like, I don't think you can probably find a single performance that he's done where you have not been at least like, oh, this was fun. At least like he made it interesting, or this was really funny, or it's like, huh, that's like unique and clever. Like even stuff that it's like he's not even being Tim Curry, like when he played like the Dark One, the evil demon, like
Yeah.
devil creature in Legend in the mid '80s. It's like he's unrecognizable except for the voice, and
Yeah.
it's like that was really unique and interesting.
Or
He
even
was
compared to
in,
like even like Congo, which is a crap movie, but
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like
he's
he's
great in that.
so funny and
Or
that
just
still
doing.
eating my sesame cake.
I just love
It's like
or
he's so good.
or he's got
God.
one of my favorite. I think it's Command and Conquer, where he's like, "I'm going where capitalism can't touch me, like space." And it's just, it's like it's hilarious. You have to watch it on YouTube. It's hilarious, and it's like, but
he's just sitting there with like the commandant uniform on, and he goes space, and it's Tim Currying all over the place. It's fantastic.
And I've seen enough like celebrities take like a voice acting gig for a video game and act like they're too good for it. But like no, you get like I've seen him doing like the dumbest, like lowest rent cartoon that he's just cashing a check for, and he still
Peter Pan and the Pirates.
Oh, he was great in that.
He was Captain Hook in that, yeah.
Yep. He was
yeah, he has a level.
he
Yeah,
was
he maintains a level of quality.
he was the bad guy in Mighty Max, but that show was actually pretty decent.
Oh yeah, I love that show. Actually, I have that show on like bootleg DVD in back here.
And he was
The reason why you can't see this because there's an absolute like junk
yeah.
behind me.
He was
Just a bookcase full of just toys and DVDs and crap.
So I'm gonna toss one in there. So I'll say they're both. I'm just gonna do both, like the Peanuts Halloween special and the Garfield Halloween special, just to get them out of the way. But I'm gonna go with one of my
You know
favorites.
what?
Um, it's kind of cheating, but we'll say because it is a party. But the Mad Monster Party, the Bass Rankin claymation film
Mm.
that has like Phyllis Diller in it, and maybe I'm calling it the wrong name. Hold on, let me look.
I I don't think I mean it's been so many years, but as a kid I did watch like the Peanuts Halloween special. I actually have the book, basically a book version of that I've had since I was a kid, and I've actually kind of continued the tradition, like read that to my daughter. I don't think we've actually shown her the I don't think we've shown her the actual like the animated special yet, my oldest daughter. But she's seen like the Thanksgiving one, she's seen like the Christmas one.
Sorry, it's Mad Monster
Um,
Party with a question mark,
hmm.
and it has
Okay.
Boris Karloff and Phyllis Diller in it.
I'm gonna mess with you for just a second.
Hmm.
There is a musical that was based off that was written in conjunction with Bobby Boris Pickett and was based off the Monster Mash called "I'm Sorry the Bridge is Out. I guess you'll have to stay for the night." And it was I can't remember what it was redone. It was probably Monster Mash the movie or something, but it was done with Candace, what's her name from Full House?
I know who you're talking
Candace-
about.
Candace Cameron.
Yeah, Candace
Is that
Cameron,
what it is?
something like that.
Okay, and she's one of the main characters in it. The fact that that exists amuses me to no end. Like that cracks me up.
I'm trying to think of other Halloween specials. There's a TV movie I really like that's pretty forgotten. It's called The Halloween Tree, that has Leonard Nimoy is like, it's kind of like this creepy old wizard guy taking these kids through all these different like cultures and how they deal with death and stuff because their friends dying. It's actually really dark for like an animated movie. And then the movie, like, so he takes them through all these things, and the end of the movie is the character, the other kids give up like a couple years off of the end of their lives each to bring their friend back from the dead, because it's kind of them chasing the ghost of their friend around before he like passes to the other life. It's out there on streaming. It's actually, for a TV movie, it's like really good. It's based on like a Ray Bradbury short story, I think.
Hmm.
I have not read as much Bradbury as I should. What was the
He's okay. I like Asimov a lot better. Like, Asimov has never disappointed me with like a book of his or a short story of his I've read.
Now I'm sitting here and I had one to go with and I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. Oh, I do remember. It has one of the dumbest sequences I remember from a movie, but still lives in my head rent free, and that is the Ernest Halloween special, where if you want to deal with the trolls, the way to deal with the trolls, as it turns out, because it's supposed to be a symbol of, a parent's love for the child and that sort of stuff, is supposed to be milk. But Ernest is reading it in the book, and two of the pages got stuck together, so the L came off on the other page. M-I something K. I've got it. And when he confronts one of the trolls, he's got this jar, and he goes, "That's right, I got real South American miak. You didn't think I could get it, did you? I'm a little too quick on my feet." And he chucks it, and it breaks on the troll's face, and the troll goes, "What is this?" And he's like, "Uh-oh."
Is that
Just, the word miak makes no sense, but it cracks me up.
was it a Halloween special, or was it Ernest Scared Stupid?
Yeah,
Ernest Scared Stupid.
That's what it is.
I
I'm
don't
sorry.
know if I ever saw that one, because I was out on Ernest after
So dumb.
the one where he went to jail and got superpowers from the electric chair.
That was after Scared Stupid, I think.
Okay.
I think that was the last Ernest movie.
No, there was like 2 or 3 after, because there's like Ernest joins the military, and like
Really?
Ernest goes to Africa
They
or
kept
something.
they the first one was like Ernest Goes to Camp, I think, and that actually was like a huge success. And so they did like 2 or 3 like theatrical movies, and then like it they kind of died off. So, but they did do like a couple like made to video ones because it was like
Oh,
the 90s, I think.
no,
Probably.
I was way wrong. So Ernest Goes to Camp was 87, which made me laugh as a kid because they had a catapult that threw an exploding toilet. Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Saves Christmas, Ernest Goes to Jail was in 1990. Scared Stupid was in 91. Then there was
Yeah.
Rides Again, and then there were 4 direct to video.
Hmm.
So,
He like milked that franchise for a while.
And then
dude,
he
I
was,
can't blame him.
I think he's probably best known now for being the dog in
Toy Story.
Toy
Yeah.
Story. Yeah.
Slinky the dog.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
The dude was a trained Shakespearean actor, but he came up with Ernest as this gimmick to use for doing commercials, and people just got such a big kick out of it they kept expanding it. It blows my mind.
Well, I mean, you might be a little. You might be a little too young for it, but I remember the Ernest commercials when I was a kid.
I kind of vaguely remember them. Yeah. I don't even know if you asked me
'Cause
like
it
what
was-
product would be selling. Like I would have no idea. I just
all
remember
sorts of no.
the character.
He did like everything, because it was always So the basis for the commercials were he was talking to his friend Vern, so he would open like. I think he'd open a window and Ernest would be there and he'd be hawking whatever it is. Like he'd be like, "Oh hey, here's a Mountain Dew," or this other thing, and then the guy would always end up like slamming the door in his face. But it would be he did a multitude of products.
He did Coke. He did Chex. He did Taco John's. Yeah, it just.
Because the original TV show was based on the commercials more than the movies,
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, like he did all sorts of stuff. Like I just remember them, like I remember them pretty vividly from being a kid.
So there's a fella who lives in Kentucky. He goes by the name Ernest. I think it's no, Billy Crank. That's what it is. And he was family friends with Ernest, and so what he tried to do for a while, because he could do like a spot on rendition of the character, was kind of lobbying as the son of Ernest. He had the blessings from the family, Varney's family and everything, but it just never took off. So
That's hard
You know.
because there's a certain charisma that you have
Yeah.
besides the voice.
like, yeah, it wasn't quite the same, but in any event.
Anyone else have any favorite Halloween? I think Matt hasn't shared one yet.
Oh, well,
Oh,
I said
Dog
I
Shoulders.
I watched like the Peanuts one. What was the Garfield? I've seen the Garfield one,
That's
but I
where
don't feel like they showed it that
that's
much.
where that has the ghost pirates in it.
Hmm.
Did you ever watch? Because this one's seared in my memory from being a kid, and I don't know if it was Halloween related. But did you ever watch the Hogan Family when you were a kid?
I kind of vaguely remember that.
There's one where they like stayed up late and watched like a horror movie or something, and they were each having like nightmares. And the last one, they all turn into zombies and attack like one of the sons.
Hmm.
And I have like it was pretty intense, like because I was probably like 8 or something when that. Now I was probably a
Um,
little older than that.
So I was obviously older, but I would say, and I don't know, I assume they still do it, but I stopped watching the show many years ago. But I always used to love like The Simpsons, Treehouse of
Oh
Horror.
yeah, those
whenever it
are
was, like,
always good.
those are always good. But I mean, again, like The Simpsons started like what, 89
Yeah.
maybe?
The
And it's still in the air.
the Christmas special was 89, and then like the first mini season was in 90.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before. It's been said before many times, but it's like the Simpsons, in my opinion, like The Simpsons has been not good or bad
For 20
longer than
years.
it actually was good.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it had NES
It's-
games.
Yeah, it's it's a show that is probably like what, like 35? It's like its 35th season, and
I think it's 36th
it
season,
and
maybe.
it stopped being like good. That it's debatable, but I would say at least by like the 12th season, people would say like
I
no
think
after like 10 it was pushing it. But
the movie the
and it
movie I the movie was shockingly good. I had no
I thought it
expectations
was
for that, and it was
good.
pretty
Yeah.
good. I
I thought
rewatched
it was
it.
good. It wasn't great, but I mean, I enjoyed it.
I rewatched it a couple years ago, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this like." Because I always had good impressions of it. Now I kind of didn't want to rewatch it because I was like, you probably just had low expectations, and I rewatched it. I'm like, yeah, I'd give it like it's like a solid like B rating.
It's fair.
Like it's better than the show was. But I'd say 10th season. It was toast by the 10th season in my opinion.
I think I still liked it, like to like at least maybe like the 12th, but yeah, I can appreciate that.
That was so big though. I don't think people realize like, especially like, cause I was like 9 and 10 when like the big mania hit, and like my dad and I would watch it, and it used to be on Thursdays. Like,
Mm.
but I remember my dad and I'd watch it all the time, and like, man, it was such a like the Simpsons mania was so big for a while.
It was, and people don't realize that like it's tough because again, it's like it's been not good for like 20 or unremarkable at best for like 20 plus years. But people don't realize like let's say like the first 10 years, like let's give it at least that much. Like people don't realize how good the first 10 years were. It was like one of the best comedy shows, not even like animated, like comedy shows probably of all time at that point, like roughly. And maybe still like would hold up, but I have to rewatch like at least like the first 10 seasons, but it still was like fantastic. Not
There
even just like, oh, it was popular. It's like, no, this is actually like really good. It's better than it. The first 10 seasons, in my opinion, are funnier and still hold up better than some stuff that is what would probably be considered classic comedies of the last like 30 something years. Like I dare you to say it's not better than Friends. Like I
there
actually love
there are two there are
Simpsons way
two
more.
there are two things that have taught me more about how to properly do satire than anything else I've ever read or ever seen, and I will go to my grave saying it. Number one, Looney Tunes, and number two, The Simpsons. Because where like so, I was probably like, I was probably like 20, 21 the first time I saw Citizen Kane. And I'm
Mhm.
sitting there watching that movie, and I'm like, God damn it, The Simpsons have literally like done a spoof on every scene of this movie. Like literally, if you watch Citizen Kane, and you've watched The Simpsons in the '90s, you've seen the whole movie because they've done like, and I'm talking like scene for scene, they have done like some callback to it,
Mm.
and they did a whole episode that's the Music Man, like a really good satire of the Music Man. But yeah, I think the problem is like I think people kind of think because Family Guy I think kind of started as like a more extreme version of The Simpsons,
Hmm.
and I think people kind of think it's like Family Guy. It's like no, they're really. I mean, Simpsons kind of I think went down the Family Guy path, but it's like no, there was like Homer was a very complex, developed character in the early years.
Yeah.
Family Guy's, the gimmick of non sequitur for goofy one off joke is fine. I mean, it's they're the only ones that do it and it works. But you also that's the gimmick is that's what they're gonna do, and so it's like getting mad at watching baseball for them playing baseball or something. It's as far as great humor goes, no, but I mean it can be funny. It's just I'm not gonna call it like
Can I say something mildly controversial? I kind of
I
think
don't know.
American
Can you?
Dad. I kind of think American Dad's better than Family Guy
I don't think that that's actually controversial.
because
I'm not
American
gonna
Dad,
say
American Dad, the characters are more developed, and like the family dynamic stronger in the way they play off of each other. I just think from top to bottom, it's like a more compelling show based on the characters. It falls more into
I
like I'll say this about Bob's Burgers. Like one of the things I like about Bob's Burgers is when Bob's Burgers isn't funny, the characters and their relationships are good enough to keep you interested when the humor's not hitting.
I'm gonna say like I don't think I'm not saying it's controversial. I just probably wouldn't agree. But that's because like I've actually enjoyed American Dad. I just am not like that big into it. It wasn't a show that I like religiously followed or watched episodes or even like in when it kind of was off, like Fox on Sundays, whatever. I wouldn't like go out of my way to necessarily find the episodes on demand or whatever like that.
No,
But
I just catch them sometimes. Like, oh, this
it wasn't
isn't bad. No, I
it
just
was
remember.
bad.
I just remember there's an episode where they're like dying on a raft, and like they're just laying there dying. And he's like, "Hey," and he gives his son like a Hertz donut and punches him, and he's like, "I used up my last energy on that Hertz donut. It was worth it."
Yeah. But I don't kind of like the derivative shows or the secondary shows.
Cleveland
Like I
sucked.
actually
The Cleveland show is garbage.
I watched some of it. I wasn't like hooked on that. But some people think it's better or they enjoyed it, but it's like I actually never really cared for Futurama.
Oh, I love
Like
Futurama.
I didn't really care for it. And it's not like like I'm gonna be trash the show. It was terrible. It's like it's just like I didn't like it as much as Simpsons back in the day. It's just not for me.
You know,
I've seen a
Matt,
lot of it. I
I'm
enjoyed
with you
it.
on that.
I mean, the Futurama I've seen, I haven't been like, oh, what a waste of my time. It was like fine, but again,
The problem with
like it's
Futurama is
in
you
your
have
sense,
to.
it's like, oh, let me watch, do a Futurama watch everything. It's like maybe if I did, I'd appreciate it more. But I'm also like,
You
I
would.
only have so many hours a day. Like,
The problem with Futurama is Futurama rewards you heavily for watching from the beginning and watching it all, and it helps the watch through. Like when it came back, it was a little more hit and miss, but it still had like good episodes. But like there are like Easter eggs that they explain later, like how he ends up in the thing in the like cryogenic thing is like the little nibbler knocked him in there. And if you go back and watch that first episode, because you're like, oh, they must have retconned that. Like, no, if you go back and watch that the scene, his fucking shadow's there from the very start. You just don't notice it.
I do think I do give Futurama credit because they traumatize a generation so badly.
Oh yeah. I don't watch that episode.
Jurassic Park. They traumatized people so badly that they did like I think they did like a Futurama movie and they retconned that to where just I'm gonna
It didn't
spoil it.
happen.
but
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, no, it didn't basically happen, but they retconned Jurassic Park where it's like I think if I'm remembering, I had seen it, but I
He
believe like
goes- He
like an
goes
alternate version.
he goes
Yeah.
back, and then like so he goes back and there's like a clone thing. But then what happens, so he gets to be with the dog, but
Yeah.
then Bender shows up to kill him, and then the dog gets fossilized in that instant is what happens. But I don't watch that episode.
Yeah.
I just skip that
But
episode.
because
It's brutal.
it's like because it's one of those like weird. It's one of those things that happens sometimes. It's something where it's such a drastic tonal shift that it's like, oh my god, and it kicks you in the gut, and then that's it. Like there is no like, but you're kidding, right? It's like nope, and then you can't reconcile it.
So if you don't know,
But it traumatized people so badly
Yeah.
that they had
So
to
if you-
retcon
so
this, where it's like,
spoil-
oh, actually, the dog had a happy ending of
so
sorts. It's like-
spoiler alert here. This is spoiler alert. Turn it off now. Fast forward 2 minutes if you're watching this on the replay. So what happens is they find this fossilized dog, and he's gonna bring it back, and then they find out the age of the dog, and he decides not to. He's like, no, like he lived this whole life after I was gone, like he wasn't my dog anymore. And then they show a replay, and it shows that the dog waited for him till like the very end, waiting for him to come back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of like the story that people I've ever heard of it, like, but Hachi in Japan, Hachi the dog, and where it's like the owner passed away. He was like a salary man, so he would like the dog would greet him at the train station, they'd
Yeah, I know.
walk home together, and then the man died of like a heart attack or something like that, and the dog for like the next 7 years would go every day to the
Yeah.
train station and just wait and everything, and then it died. And it's like it's this like heartbreaking story of like the loyalty and love that an animal, or in this case a dog, could have for like its owner, and it's like it really like plays with you. So yeah, like it would like traumatize people because it's like, oh my god, like the dog like had this horrible lonely
There.
existence waiting for a master that was never gonna come.
Speaking of
So yeah,
sats,
they had to retcon it. They had to retcon it. So it's like, no, he had a happy ending because actually a version of Fry came
so
back and
speaking
they
of
lived happily.
speaking of satire, there's a good Looney Tunes on that one of the docu ones. And it's this dog waiting for this owner, waiting for him all these years. And the owner shows up, and the dog's like, "What are you thinking? Like, I'm hungry. Like, leaving a poor dog here waiting for you." And the dog's just like totally like chewing him out about it. It's a funny little.
Giving him the business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never got into Futurama either. Not because I think there's anything wrong. I just never got into it. And then one time when I was like, okay, let's give this a try, and I sit down and watch it. Guess what I got? I got the last 5 minutes of Jurassic Park, and I was like, no.
So Fox screwed it. You have to watch it from the beginning. I'm just gonna straight up say you got to watch it from the beginning. It like Fox was really bad because it showed it all out of sequence and stuff.
What was the? Well, I mean, they did that to Firefly too. I don't know why.
Jurassic Park is brutal. I don't watch it on rewatches.
So,
but South Park. I mean, Futurama though has a lot of those gut punch episodes. Like when Leela meets her parents. There's one towards the end where he gets to spend time with his mom in a dream, and there's another one where like he was thinking back, like there was this whole thing, and like he had this kind of tumultuous relationship with his dad, and his dad like saved him from something, and he's just like, I'm hard on you just because I love you, and all those like weird stuff. Actually, the ending's really touching too, because it's him and Leela kind of get stuck in this time frozen thing, and they grow old together, and the professor shows up, is like, hey, you want to do it again, and all that. So it's a good show. I think one of my favorite parts, I think the devil challenges Leela to a fiddling contest, and he does this fancy thing, and he hands the fiddle to her, and she like fucks up the first note. She just beats the shit out of him with this golden fiddle, and the devil screams while she does it. So our topic tonight is also Halloween related. So this is the topic of monster heels. So I kind of wanted to explore the concept of what a good monster heel is, like what makes a bad monster heel, and who are some good examples of monster heels. So I think so Shad might have some ideas on this since he like worked in the business.
One of the biggest things that I want to start with is that a monster heel is not. There's so many people like your quintessential monster heels. If I say monster heel, people think of Undertaker, Kane, Big Van Vader, as just off the tops, and they're compared to everybody else, big guys. Just because you're big does not make you a good monster heel. Big Show was never a monster heel. He was a big dude. He was like, there's a difference between giant and monster heel. So I am, if you're going to have a monster heel, part of it, size helps a lot, because you do have to have an aura that is scary. You have to have some quality. Your physical charisma has to be foreboding in some fashion or another.
Can I ask you a question since we just watched it? Would you consider the Moondogs that we watched in the USWA to be monster heels, or are they just ass kickers?
I would put them more into the roughneck ass kicker category. I mean, they were vicious, they were mean, but I wouldn't say they were monsters. Because there's a sense of inevitability that they're going to beat the hell out of somebody, but I feel like there needs to be an aspect of menace to it. That was the word I was looking for.
Of like, of terror that, I agree. Like, I think there's like a size component to it where they're not just like, you're afraid of them because you know they are incredibly violent, that you're probably going to get your ass kicked by them. I think there has to be, to go with your menace comment, like a physical, like they're physically imposing, but not in a way that's like, oh, they're just scary looking, but like this dude is like 6'8". So it's like he just visually at least like looks like he could dominate me just because he's gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think size is probably more of an aspect. You don't have to be like 6'8", I think. But I think like being like, here's like 2 6-foot dudes that are just violent rednecks.
Well,
It's like that to me, like, yeah, that wouldn't be a monster heel, but that doesn't mean that they could be any less menacing in their own way.
the
You know.
the only guy I think that's smaller, on the smaller side, that I think you could classify in the monster heel category is maybe Taz at points in like ECW.
I'm still putting Taz into the ass kicker category instead.
He has
Yeah.
some tropes of the menace though.
To an extent. So one of the other things I think that if you're going to have a monster heel, and I'm not going to say you can't have a small monster heel.
I think it's harder.
It's definitely harder. Having someone big makes the monster heel much easier. So you have, like, for example, if Darby Allin turned heel, I think he could probably pull it off, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. Just as an example. So size is not a necessary component, but I think it is a very common component. The physical menace that goes with it. And then the other thing that comes with being a monster, I think, is going to be that I'm not saying you no-sell everything, but there's going to be a higher than usual perceived pain threshold. Like whatever you're throwing at him not working, it would roll into that monster thing, because then you get a little bit of the Michael Myers Jason Voorhees, like, I'm throwing everything at him and it's not sticking.
Like, kind of like, I think good examples would be like the Mankind Abyss. Like, they're going to sell and they're going to go down, but you're going to have to murder them.
They're just... Yeah. So, early Mankind...
Mankind
is a monster heel.
Oh, totally.
And Cactus Jack, I think you could say would be a monster heel.
I feel like I'm cutting hairs here. I feel like early Cactus Jack is more like a psychopath than like a monster heel. Like, I feel like the crazy comes through, like, whereas, well, I guess Mankind is kind of...
I would almost argue Mankind would be more in the vein of a monster heel.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Mankind approaches the matches more as a monster than like he necessarily did as Cactus.
Okay.
Mick Foley, we said before, Mick Foley's actually like shockingly tall. He's actually big.
He's 6'3" and a half, I think.
He loses. You lose a lot of perspective on him though, because he's been hunched for like a good majority of his career.
Yeah, but I mean, I've actually like gotten his autograph. I've stood next to him, and I'm not a huge guy. I'm like 6 foot, but he was taller than me, and I'm like, oh, like I was actually surprised by that, because I'm like, maybe it's because he's hunched over. I assumed he was like maybe like my height. It's like, no, like he's actually bigger than me.
I went to his one man
physically bigger.
I went to his one man show, so he didn't like. I
Mm,
saw him on stage and I was near him, but I was looking up at him. And then when he did
mm.
like the fan meet and greet, he was sitting for the whole thing. And like if you took a picture, you could you like he would do like whatever with you, but like he tended to stay sitting. And I don't blame him. I don't think it's easy for him to sit,
Mm,
but like I've never stood like next to him.
mm.
He's a little bigger than
Uh,
you think, like when you're close to him, though.
yeah.
He's
Chat.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish off.
I have walked next to him, shoulder to shoulder. We were on opposite sides of a a rope line, but I walked next to him, and we were about the same height. And so he's built also a bit broader than you might think, because
Mm,
part of so many of his gimmicks is he's hunched and his shoulders kind of roll in for it.
mm.
But he's taller and broader than you might think he is. So
Yeah.
I am of a size with him, I would say.
Yeah. What I was gonna add is I looked him up. Abdullah the Butcher is only listed as 6 foot tall, so
Hmm.
he's not like he's 6'7", 6'8". But he also he had like the girth thing,
Yeah.
so you could still say like I would absolutely say Abdullah was a monster heel, but he also was big, so it's like maybe that's not the best example because height wise he wasn't like monster size as you would think, but he was also kind of big and broad, so it's like and I would say again, Mankind would be kind of fitting the monster heel. He's not like the size you thought he was, but he actually was pretty big.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to find and I'm trying to think of an example of a guy who would be like smaller. Let's say
Yeah.
like maybe 6 foot height, and then what at least like for the 80s, 90s, what you would consider maybe like average size, like let's say 250, which again, you lose perspective. Like
Yeah.
250 in like you walk, if you were to go out in your daily life and you see a dude who's like 6 foot 250, that's a big dude. Like big dude. But in wrestling, like back in the 80s, 90s for sure, 6 foot 250, it's like you're almost like you're at best average or smaller compared to some
Yeah,
guys.
because some dudes were just
Oh,
massively.
well, I think he's like 60, but I think he's still like pretty well. But Billy Gunn was like, actually
Oh
having
yeah,
seen him in person was shocking. I'm like, that's how big Billy Gunn is. Billy Gunn was like, when I met him, was like 6'5", 6'6",
yeah,
and
Yeah.
just jacked. And there was a few
yeah.
years ago, he was
He's
60 then, but he was probably like 55. And it's like, you should not be as big as you are.
he's leaner than you think he'd be in person. Like that's I think what Shad and I both said when we were at that convention. We're like, oh, he's an interesting person to me because like I've never seen like if you take a toy to Billy Gunn, like he wants to like he'll sign it, but he wants to like look at it and stuff. Like
Yeah.
he's gonna sit there for a couple of minutes to look at it and be like, and if he hasn't seen me, he's like, oh, I haven't seen this one, or like, oh, this is a rare one. But they were
So
pretty nice because like I had a picture with them and they're like, okay, get over here and like all that stuff. Like he's
yeah,
fairly I mean he wasn't like as personable as like Jimmy Hart was, but he wasn't like rude or anything.
so the thing about Billy Gunn, Billy Gunn is here. Yeah, this is an odd comparison. He's he's like one of the main characters in Discworld. He's built like a carrot. His shoulders are broad here, and the rest of his body narrows down. And so, I mean, the way he dresses on TV, he doesn't look like he trims out that much. And I don't know particularly why, but yeah, his upper body is stacked out. So, if you're going for monsters, I think another way, if we want to look for someone who might fit your monster heel, uh, I don't know if we'd call him a heel, but someone that you could make the argument might be a monster, but it was not a big dude, but had the aura to carry it off. I'll throw this out as a debate point, but what about New Jack?
Yeah, Yeah, I wouldn't argue that.
If I think there's like a size component, but if New Jack was like 6'6", 300 pounds, it's like, yeah, like that he would be
Well,
like for the 90s at least, like all-time monster heel. He was just like incredibly like violent.
well, how
Yeah,
about
that's what I was going
Yeah.
with. Is there's this menace
Yeah.
of you hear the music and you're just like, oh God.
I actually have a good one because you just sparked my thinking, and they worked in similar times, similar companies. Sabu,
Yeah, similar kind of a vibe in that he's gonna jack you up.
and he's not going to go down easy.
No, but it feels like Sabu carried less menace. Um,
Um,
maybe that's just from what I saw.
yeah, I
Um,
don't. I think I think he's around and about. You could think he was a monster heel though.
so if I was gonna, there was a guy who came to train with us once, and this dude he was not taller than me, and he was not trim. You know, he was a big boy, but the thing about him that made it work is, first of all, he had very pale blonde hair, like not like albino pale, but he had very pale blonde hair, and he had a goatee that kind of came down into a point a little bit, right? But the way that his face was structured is, if he put a mean mug on, you're just like, oh God, this is a guy who like eats babies, which is they like, that's what other guys there call him, is they just started calling him baby eater. And
Modest proposal.
no, just a monster who's doing, who just does it. But it's, the idea behind that was, we could build a monster heel out of this guy. And we did this thing for a while of having the practice of having people go in and attack and basically bounce off of him to sell, as a way of saying, like, is this a thing? And it was totally a thing. The biggest issue that he had was when it was time for for him to start, taking it back. His selling wasn't great, but I mean, he was just starting out. That's to be expected. But he had the potential, and on the my last run, I like to think was monster heelish. Brad, I think you saw that. The only full copy I had of that chain match that I did in that, but I think that came off as rather monster heelish in that.
Yeah, because I know you don't have a ton. Because you were shocked. 'Cause I found some. I don't remember what his name was, and you knew who he was, but I found some footage of you on his YouTube page.
He was like Assassin #2 or something like that.
Like the like the superstar assassin or something like that. You knew who he was the second I said, "Hey, do you know this guy?" Because he's got a match here, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I know him."
Yeah, that battle royal that I was in.
Yeah,
and
you know
and
what?
what did I do in that? Is I was trying to kind of monster heel in that too.
We're kind of dumb because we just did a couple of guys that I think touch in that territory, but the sheep herders.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, but I also put them in like the Moondog spot where it's like they're just like ass kickers.
They have a
But
bit of menace to them, though.
yeah, I mean, I do get it. Like there is like a menace quality. Both the sheep herders and the Moondogs while I would not consider them monster heels, like they were monstrous. Like that's an adjective I would use for them, in that they were like mildly terrifying because they were unhinged and exceedingly violent, to the point where, it's certainly we saw in the Moondogs, they would just they literally made like two jobbers like bleed with how violent they were, and which to me was like shocking. I'm like, oh my God, like they made the jobbers, like they're like doing chair shots, or like the poor jobbers are like gigging for these crazy rednecks. It's like, it was pretty impressive. But yeah, like I would almost want to consider them monster heels, but again, I can't personally can't get past like the size thing. I do think to be a true monster heel, at least as I kind of perceive it growing up, was more like you need a size component. And you can
I
kind of get
am,
away with not being like super tall, but you kind of need like the girth then. Like
yeah.
like
Well,
like Earthquake and Typhoon, the natural disasters in the WWE. Like I would kind of consider them like monster heels.
I'd say
Earthquake,
Earthquake's a much better heel than Typhoon was, but he's a
oh
better
well,
yeah,
worker.
that's
yeah,
just because
absolutely,
John
yeah.
Tenta
Well,
was better than Fred
Yeah.
Ott across the board.
yes, across absolutely.
So how do you feel if I'm gonna make this statement? I think Kamala is like the template that you should
Kamala.
work from for a monster heel.
I do not agree with that.
In the sense of
Um,
like how vulnerable he should be versus like
So
no, go ahead, Matt. I need some time to chew on this.
I kind of, so I kind of, I don't know that I across the board agree with you. I kind of agree with you in the sense that I think I see where you're going. It's like he is presented as a big deal, as just incredibly devastating in terms of like how he's presented. Like it's just
he's a force of
monster in the
nature.
real sense. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Force of nature. Like he comes in like a force of nature, like he's a hurricane. That's very topical, right? And it's certainly in like
Yeah.
Southern America right now. Comes in like a hurricane, is this horrific destructive force, comes in, decimates probably like some lower card guys on his way up to like challenging the main face, kicks the shit out of the main face, and then the main face has to come back and fight his way and like actually defeat him, and then of course he moves on to the next territory. But yeah, it's like I kind of can see where it's like that there is a template, there's like a blueprint to work with, and Kamala did like really kind of seamlessly fit with that. But I kind of don't want to include say Kamala just because
He's not
I
like a
think that
great worker. Like there's people that were better workers that did it. I think where Kamala,
yeah,
where I
yeah.
think where I think Kamala like I think is a good template in my head is Kamala understood how to be threatening and dominate but still be he was vulnerable just enough. Like he thread that needle of vulnerability I thought perfectly because he was dominant but like even like guys he was going to beat and dominate, he gave just enough to not gobble them up and spit them out like some guys would.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can kind of see where you're going, and I agree to it to an extent.
And
I
Bret
guess I'm
Hart
hung up
speaks
on the
very
fact that,
highly of him.
well, yeah, I guess I'm hung up on the fact that I don't think Kamala was like a great worker, but you do have a good point that I don't know if it's like Kamala was selfless, but Kamala certainly like he didn't seem like he had a big head. He did come and he knew the role that I'm gonna like beat the shit out of people,
Like
and
if
then
you
like beat at the main face, but then I'm gonna like be defeated at the end. But he also wasn't like I'm gonna just make this guy on the way up or the main character, like
if
the main worker, the main star. I'm gonna make him look like garbage.
if you listen to
'Cause
Kamala
I
shoots,
have a swell head.
if you listen to Kamala shoots, this is gonna sound really weird to say, but like if you listen to him talk enough, like well, one, he was a professional, like he was there to get his paycheck and go home, but like if you hear him talk about like the Kamala character and stuff, like he's kind of an artist in his approach to it because when he talks about stuff, he's like, oh yeah, I love doing this, I love doing that, like I thought about this stuff. Like he's kind of an artist in how he approached the character of Kamala for a long time. Like it got flanderized down the road because that was just easier, but like he would talk about like if someone would come up to him for an autograph, like when he was a heel in like Mid-South or something, he wouldn't turn them down. He would just act like he couldn't speak English. And he would just look at them confused. And he wouldn't be mean about it, but he would just. But he said like they used to bring him to the shows in like the back of this wagon, and they'd like, they do something with like a chicken where they'd act like he ate it, like they throw him like a chicken or something, and he'd toss out like bloody feathers or something. He'd talk about how he loved doing that stuff.
I think if I'm sorry, Matt, you have a thought. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say like I haven't heard a lot of like Kamala shoots, but the kind of like shoots or interviews I've heard with Kamal, like the real guy, like he just seems like he seemed like he was such a good natured guy.
Yeah.
Like he just seemed really pleasant, and it kind of like does speak to like how you'd be I know he passed away, and we actually did a show on him, but you'd be hard pressed to find guys who like would talk bad about him, because I think he was like universally well liked, because he was easy, like as that was his nickname, right? Like Easy Money. He was easy
Yeah.
in the ring, didn't have like a swell head. He was like a
Didn't
good natured
I
guy.
think Brett said he
Yeah,
didn't beat you up, and he didn't like. He said like he liked him
professional,
because
like you said.
he didn't have an ego about selling for little guys.
Yeah. What were we gonna say, Shad?
So if I'm going to pick, someone to be a template to pattern a monster heel after, one of the things I think that another quality that goes into a monster heel that we didn't list earlier is there's got to be a certain inaccessibility to them. Kamala and Abdullah were marketed as monsters from this foreign area, and Taker and Kane were maybe supernatural monsters. And I'm not using this as my template. I'm just putting it out there. Like, if you put the entire Wyatt family together, you have a monster heel group. I'm not going to say Bray was a monster heel himself. Actually, I don't think any of them were themselves, but as a group, you could call it that. But I'm going to say, if you're going to pattern it off of one person, I think using early model Mankind is probably going to be the most successful route to go, because what you're doing is you're having a character who is inaccessible in the idea of a certain amount of derangement. You're having a character that has a look that does not conform to what you're used to. He looks like he wears raggedy clothes because that's all he's going to wear. You're going to have, and the thing that made him menacing was the fact that you could not keep him from coming after you again. He just kept getting back up and kept getting back up and kept getting back up until you're hitting him with a car and he's still getting back up. So what that does for you, hang on, I'm sorry, let me finish my train of thought. What that does for you is, in that you still have the menace of you're always looking over your shoulder because he may not be done with you, but he's got enough vulnerability that you standing there, and I mean, you can just stand there and beat the living hell out of him, and he takes it, and he goes down, and you're like, oh, finally I got it. And then he just kind of rolls over, and he kind of lifts his head and looks at you, and you're just like, oh God, So there's a vulnerability built in, there's a menace that comes with it, and it also, little side bit to it is, it helps you keep from developing an ego, because if the menace is the fact that you keep getting back up and you keep coming after them and your offense is a bit savage and wild, then that keeps you from having this ego about being, the biggest, baddest, whatever. It's like, no, you have to get your ass kicked as part of this. If I was going to tell someone who wanted to be a monster heel, I would say start with that sort of thing. That's going to be the template. I would say you study to start building from.
I think
Shad. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say I think the inaccessibility thing has some legs to it, because I'm thinking about other monster heels. So like Bam Bam Bigelow has the head tattoo. So automatic that's inaccessible because he looks like a crazy person. Like Dump Matsumoto looks like she would just bite your face off.
I actually was gonna say, like, Dump Matsumoto is. We talked about her before in the show, but for people who are not aware, like that's an example of a monster heel. She was, again, kind of bigger, at least certainly compared to other Joshi workers, but just terrifying, absolutely terrifying, and like the way she acted. Oh my God, like that's a heel.
Yeah,
that's a heel. Like I'm adult male can watch a Dump Matsumoto match and be like, oh my God, like cringe and be afraid of her for her opponent in a match.
So the reason that I don't love Dump Matsumoto as an archetype is because basically she just beat the shit out of everybody and lost sometimes. Like there's not enough there. I don't feel like there was enough vulnerability into it for that to be considered an archetype.
Mhm.
That's
fair.
Killer Khan. You guys had is like not that long ago talking about him as kind of a big scary heel, inaccessible, size, that sort of stuff. Despite my personal feelings about him, you have a lot of these things kind of mixed in. I would say he was not a. I personally don't think he was a good one, but that's how he was meant to be perceived.
He has
I
some weird
I would
complexities to him though, because he was kind of a coward at the end of the day too. Like when you got to those big matches, like he usually just got beaten horribly.
yeah. Uh, I think Brad and I were more favorable to him than you were.
Oh,
I thought he was good.
100%.
I thought he was a good base. I didn't think he was great. I would rank him as like a monster heel. I
I
would agree that he wasn't a great one.
he's
He's
not
not like
like
an all-time great,
no.
but he's on the lesser. But I would rate him at that level.
I think I said that I saw his utility. Like I don't personally think he's great,
Yeah,
but like as a guy you bring in for 6 months that just beats people up and then he gets his ass kicked and leaves, like I think he served his purpose in that aspect because I do think the one
yeah.
thing I saw in those matches is he takes a beating real good.
He I would rank him below Kamala. But I do
Kamala
feel he was
has
better working than he's better working than Kamala, but he wasn't as interesting or as dynamic as Kamala.
Kamala has so much like flair and like personality to him though because
Yeah,
like there's stuff with Kamala where like there's stuff where he wrestles the Von Erichs and like he's real cautious and stuff because he knows like he needs to stay away from the Iron Claw and he really emotes that and like there's times where like he really pulls off like the savvy like hunter kind of doing this as like a side gig. Like there's a lot like Kamala really um there's a charisma and he really like his facial features are real good and stuff and his body language is real strong.
the thing I was gonna say a minute ago, Shad, um, he was bigger comparatively, but I looked it up. Bray Wyatt was 6'3", billed at 6'3", 285. That's big dude, and he
Yeah.
certainly like was visually like a bigger guy. That's obviously a far cry from even people like Brody Lee or Luke Harper, but that's I would actually Bray Wyatt is an example. I would almost like if you wanted to make the argument like Bray Wyatt was a monster heel, I would let that go. Like I don't think
Yeah.
size wise exactly, and he didn't exactly like wrestle like that. But if you wanted to argue, especially with like the kind of horror movie elements to it, and especially once you start to get into like the theme character, which whatever. I think that if you wanted to make the overall argument that Bray played it like the monster heel category, like I would probably like accept that. Is he like a archetypal example of that? No. But
He
if you want to
was
make the argument
more.
like he was kind of like it, I'd be like, oh, okay. Like I would let that go. I wouldn't like argue with that. I wouldn't think that no. Like I would have a strong opinion. I'd be like, yeah, I could see that. Because I do think that there are elements that I think play into that. And he was I think in God God rest his soul, like he's only been gone like a little over a year.
Yeah.
Um, I think I think when all it's all said and done, like we'll have to look at it like probably more years in the future. But I think overall, people will appreciate his work in the Bray Wyatt character a lot. I think towards the end, unfortunately, got kind of silly with the Fiend, but
Yeah, there needed to be someone to
it
tell
wasn't
him no
entirely
towards
his
the
fault
end.
either.
No,
Yeah.
the thing. Okay, there's I hedged on Bray for the simple reason that
Mhm.
I was a Bray mark. The thing is that Bray was, I'm gonna say, smarter than most monster heels because he was part of his gimmick was also being a manipulator. But the thing, if he's billed at 6'3", he was probably around 6 feet. I'm just guessing on it. But he did have a look that worked, and his perception really carried a lot of that too. The thing is that I am of the opinion that what screwed up his Monster heel run was Vince not getting the original cult leader character. And when he didn't get the character, he didn't want to do anything with it. He Bray would put all this work into these feuds and make it into a big thing, and then just get crushed at the end of it, which is a shit thing to do to someone who's supposed to be a monster heel for you. But that's what kept happening. I think that it would be fair for, and yeah, like you said, God rest his soul, it's only been a year out, but I think it would be fair to look at him as probably one of the most creative people on the national wrestling stage, and kind of funneling in a lot of horror movie tropes and that sort of stuff into it. And then, people had to go and have their stupid ass ideas piled in on top of it, like damn Michael Hayes with the House of Horror match or shit like that. It's like Michael Hayes wanted to do that for years, and it's like, no, we should do this House of Horror, or the stupid ass projection thing at Mania that was all Vince. It's like that's not Bray's fault, and it undermined him. But and also, God, I think he was the one that. I'm not going to get into the whole thing with The Undertaker either, but it was the presentation, yes. But when I was doing my Monster run, I started out by doing kind of similar stuff. I was taking a page from that because people were like, well, he's a good guy last time he was here. What happened? And in me trying to be too clever, I dropped Twin Peaks references in at the beginning, and nobody got it. And I was just like, you know what, hell with it. I'm not doing this anymore. Because I was trying to be too clever with it. But yes, he would qualify for, if for no other reason than the presentation of the gimmick. And his ring style was one that it was meant to not be complicated. It was meant to be very brutal and simplistic and direct. As opposed to, you want to get into another aspect of a monster heel thing, ring style. If you want to have a monster heel, you better never see them working a wrist lock. That shit don't work. Like that'll kill a monster heel gimmick. Like that. It's...
I just looked one up because he is a bit on the smaller side for a monster heel, but I think he fits it. But Nikita Koloff.
Yes. You know what? I agree with you on that. He had the inaccessibility. He had the scary aspect because he would just run you over.
And he was a psychopath in his interviews and stuff.
Yeah. So I think that's another good example.
Also, underrated character work. If you watch his promos, if you watch Jim Crockett Promotions, it's a small touch he puts into his character. But the longer he does promos, his English gets a little better over time.
Yeah.
And it's a really small touch. Also, another one I thought of, but we don't really have, I think, a lot of footage, and we haven't watched a lot of them. But they would be a little on the smaller side, especially Mad Dog, but the Vachons, I bet, would fall into that category if we watched some of them.
They might. I'd have to watch stuff before I came to the conclusion. I think that's part of what made Abdullah successful in the territories, is he was one of the few monster heels that you could bring around, and his aura was not hurt by losing.
Yeah.
He was a threat regardless.
Because you end up
same thing goes for Mankind. Mankind was always a threat. It's just whether or not you were able to win in the strictures of the match you were in.
Yeah, because you end up, if you don't have vulnerability, you end up like Detroit, where they brought Andre in to beat the Sheik and he didn't beat the Sheik, and everyone just lost hope and gave up.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd count the Sheik. I've seen a lot of Sheik. I don't know if I would count him as a monster heel though. He's a weird outlier. I really don't know what because he kind of has a lot of characteristics of a monster heel, like the inaccessibility, the violence, but I don't know.
He might be more of a psychopath than a monster heel, and that sounds like we're splitting hairs, but there's a different perception.
Yeah.
Like if we're gonna have like a hard and fast definition of what a monster heel is.
And his culture, like, so if you don't know, like, they went to Toronto a lot. They had like a very large Hindu population at the time, so he was
Okay.
a really big heel there because his gimmick was he was a Muslim, so he was really pushing on those cultural differences, like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why he sold well in that area, was because the Hindu population hated him because of religious like undertones. I'm trying to think of some other people that would classify. I think Joe at points. He's a little more technical than a monster heel, but I think Samoa Joe at points in his career, especially like in the ROH days, could be a monster heel.
Interesting.
He breaks a lot of the tropes, but he does fall more in, I think, to like the Vader camp of.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because Vader didn't have that inaccessibility, but he had so much aura around him that.
That's not true. Vader did have the mask.
Vader, I would absolutely put as
Oh, yeah.
monster.
Because
Easily.
that's a funny side story. So I guess Michael Cole said like the first time he met Vince, Vince was like, okay, like, I'm glad you're working here, but you have to put he gave him Vader's mask, like, his first days. Like, you have to put this mask on to work here. And, you know, if you don't know, Vader notoriously never washed his mask and it smelled terrible.
On the road, Vader didn't typically wash his gear.
Yeah.
And,
he's a very sweaty guy.
yeah. Which is, yeah, that's rough. I had one show, like I worked back-to-back shows one weekend, and I went and I worked the show, and I went home, and I had to go to work in the morning. And then after I got off work, I just had to grab my stuff and go back. And it was not good. That was just one day. I can't imagine like a tour at a time.
So would Diesel before the face turn be a monster heel?
Maybe when he was Sean's enforcer,
I kind of feel like he's just a
you could
badass.
maybe make the argument.
I struggle with that because he's kind of in the Sid vein, but I like kind of not. And I would count Sid as like a monster heel.
Yeah.
I would consider monster heel. Diesel again, like maybe like when he was Sean's enforcer, but I don't know that I would make that argument. But if someone wanted to make that argument, maybe. But I don't think I would.
Okay,
I wouldn't probably rate Kevin
Yeah.
Nash as that, but
I'm gonna throw a controversial one out here that you're probably gonna say no to, and it wouldn't count for all of his career, but he is smaller, a lot smaller. But Kevin Sullivan, especially in his Army of Darkness days.
that's a compelling one.
But he's also big for his height, though. Like, he's a big boy because he's like a power lifter, so he is a big boy even if he's short.
Yeah, he was thick. Like, so he had size to him, but he was just like, he's built like a air where it was like not very tall, like
Yeah, and he's
short, stocky.
And he is inaccessible because, you know, he does worship the Dark Lord.
Yeah. Abuladin.
Yeah.
I'm just
He's in a weird that gimmick's kind of in a weird space all on its own, I think.
it's like wanting to be a monster heel, but it feels like it's just, and it has the trappings of it, but it feels like it's just not quite there. And I'm trying to put my finger on why.
I would kind of agree with you, Shad. I'm not quite able to articulate it either, but I agree that it's like I want to. I want to be like, yeah, that kind of fits, but it doesn't. It doesn't
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
fit.
There's something
As an
that
aside, go ahead, go ahead.
no, go ahead and do your thought because I'm getting ready to switch gears.
It was just that this is like going kind of a tangent, but like after doing the retrospective of his, at least it's like his early work, um, I kind of don't know if I feel he was a good worker or not, just because like some of the stuff we saw, he kind of trended into the theme of it's like, oh, we're gonna have a match, we're gonna build this big match, and then it's like a 10-minute match, of which it's like mostly just bullshit, and then it's like a false finish or a non-finish,
So
and it's like.
I don't necessarily
When he was
think.
at WCW, honestly, like he was forced to have like actual finishes, so I thought he was a little better.
I
But
I think so I don't know what I think on that front with Kevin Sullivan. I've seen him in good matches, but like it's hard to tell with him, especially in the Florida stuff, because he is such like a
mm,
smart guy. I don't know if he was like saw like a void in the market of Florida and was just filling that with his matches.
mm,
Because he is a smart guy. Like I could see him like being a decent worker, being like, hey, Florida's never really seen like this psychopath like just absolute bloodbath character, and like oh yeah, the matches will suck, but I'd really be filling like a void. Like because I could see like a smart guy, and I think we've seen it before where they forego match quality, especially in that era when it mattered less to do something different.
So I
yeah,
think what I would say about Sullivan is that his Taskmaster gimmick is a psychopath gimmick with monster heel trappings. Um, Now, to where I was going to switch gears is a more recent yet not probably non-classic monster heel because he wasn't doing it for a long time, and sadly he's no longer with us either. But for the stretch of time that he was on TV, Umaga was presented as monster heel, like number one that was on TV at the time.
He actually
My
has a good argument for being a like Mount Rushmore level monster heel.
the thing that bugs me, and this is such a weird thing to pick on, that bugs me about his monster heelish stuff, is his damned finish.
I
I
didn't
had
hate
the
it.
hardest time. I had the hardest time mentally getting over thumb to the throat. It was like Drax and Guardians, like finger to the throat means death.
It was
You
old
know,
school. I
the
didn't.
Samoan spike. And I'm like, dude, I don't
Yeah, but I
know.
mean, like Terry Gordy did it. Like,
And I didn't care for it then. Like that's one that one broke the suspension of disbelief for me. That's
I mean,
and
like,
I know full well. Look, hitting me in the throat, I'm gonna. But
come
it's
on,
on my
like,
TV, and I'm watching this stuff, and I don't know, man.
Ming was
It
just.
just doesn't connect.
They protected it and treated it seriously, but when you really think about it, Ming was just grabbing guys like neck waddle and squeezing a little bit.
Okay, so the difference for me, and yes, Ming and the Barbarian would be also good monster heel candidates. The difference for me with the two with Ming is the Tongan Death Grips grabbing the other guy's Adam's apple and just crushing it.
Well,
And it's like,
he
oh,
emoted well too.
crushing it. Yeah. Um, okay. Interesting thought then. If we're gonna Mount Rushmore monster heels, would Umaga go there? He
He'd
was
be.
definitely the biggest threat presented in his time period. Like, there's no question about that.
I think he might have an argument for being like the last truly great one that got protected properly and
Okay, that's the last properly protected monster heel might be a good way. Well, okay, but all right. Here, I'm going to shift even more recently. Until he developed a back issue where he couldn't stay on it for more than 3 seconds, Miro the Redeemer was a monster heel.
Yeah. The problem I think with the Mount Rushmore is like there's a lot of guys where you'd have to consider. And there's a lot of guys that would have arguments, but a lot of those guys wouldn't necessarily be great workers by modern standards because so if you're talking about monster heels, like guys like Ox Baker, you have to seriously consider them due to their historical relevance and the fact that like they caused riots and were massive draws in their days. But Ox Baker isn't a great worker at the end of the day. But like he absolutely deserves to be in the conversation, and I think people would have a hard time getting past his limitations as a worker.
He was limited, and I haven't seen like that much of it, but he was limited. But he also with, or it's like there, you could probably like throw a rock and not hit guys who were good workers. It was like not that many people who were actually good workers. Like I bring him up because we saw obviously recent stuff of his, but like in the early 80s, like 60-something-year-old Luthez was still like, oh, Luthez. It's like, it wasn't because he was a big star, because he was, but it's like he was actually one of the few like actually good workers. Like most of like the people from his era were just like not good. Like they weren't. Like Ox Baker though was an actual like unique and interesting character, and I think that really like
and a great
told him. I mean, there were some good workers. Like we've mentioned before, like people like Dave Meltzer, like he grew up with people like Ray Stevens and stuff like that, who actually were like really good workers. So that's what he grabbed. He's always been like a work rate guy.
And I mean, there's work.
Like
there's work rate guys when you go back, like Vern Gagne. I've seen him in his prime. He's a work rate guy. The Destroyer is fucking awesome.
Oh yeah.
Don Leo Jonathan. Bruno had his strong points as a worker. There's guys.
I would say Bruno was pretty decent. He just didn't have like the quality of work of the caliber of like opponent versus like didn't necessarily need to. But I actually felt when he had to actually work, he was actually, I would rate Bruno as a pretty good worker.
I mean, we watched
and Bruno. I'm sorry to cut you off, Brad, but like if Bruno was like his heyday was today, I actually think he'd be like, he would still rise to like that level, because I actually think he was a good worker. Plus, he had like incredible charisma, and it was a good promo. Yeah. So I think he would still like excel, even if it's like you take him from his heyday of the 60s, 70s, and his time was like now. Like he still would excel, because I think he was actually was really one of those top tier actually like talents in the industry.
And you had Jack Briscoe, Giant Baba, the Funks. Fritz wasn't terrible. Like there were a lot of good workers. It's just not. I've seen a lot of great workers in old stuff. It's just a different era. I was losing my.
It had to do as much.
Yeah. So, and I think.
If you want,
I was just gonna say, if to have the conversation about, because when you're comparing eras, is you absolutely have to compare their position within the era they were in as compared to the position of the other person for the environment they were in. It's not directly apples to apples, but if you're going to get as close as you can on comparing them, then that's something I feel like you have. That's the way I would bring it into account. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, it was a couple of minutes ago. I had someone in my head, and then I totally like forgot who I had as a monster heel in my head, and now I'm frustrated because I can't remember who it was. Oh well, I'll remember it as soon as the show's off there, and I'll be cursing.
The hell of it is that there's a lot of guys who the attempt was to make them monster heels, and it didn't work.
Yeah, he wasn't.
Super Invader didn't work. The Warlord didn't work. I think Mike Awesome might count as a monster heel.
Yeah, I would count him.
For ECW. When you get him into WCW, not so much, but In ECW, I'd think he would count as a monster heel.
They could have in WCW. They just sucked.
They didn't.
Yeah.
Chad, did you
Yeah.
mention the new warlorder? That's an old Laughs fan joke.
And then I'm like, cause I like Ox Baker like is definitely one, and I mean he even like pop cultural, like he was in Escape from New York. Um,
Mm.
his Price is Right appearance is hilarious
Oh yeah.
because he's still like he manages to still be a heel while, you know, being kind of charming and funny. And they put him next to like the shortest old ladies. It's hilarious if you've ever seen it.
So I would say an interesting thing that happened with late 90s WCW is that they had a their mid-card tag team division had lots of monster heel stuff in it because we already mentioned the Faces of Fear, Ming and Barbarian, but you could sprinkle Wrath and Mortis into that as well. I mean, yes, it's part of the not Mortal Kombat for legal reasons thing, but the presentation and that sort of stuff, I would say.
I'd probably put Wrath as a monster heel, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't put Adam Bomb as a monster heel.
No, he was just a chump as Adam Bomb.
But I would consider maybe putting Night Stalker as a monster heel.
Yeah.
But I also I wouldn't put Brian Clark as Chronic as a monster heel. Like it's on it. That's weird. Like that's a guy who had like the size and I suppose the inaccessibility at points as a monster heel, but not the entirety of his career. That's like actually a weird example. I don't know. They would put Mortis as a monster heel. Like he had like the mask. I guess you would say inaccessibility, but not. He wasn't actually. I would feel like to me like the size is still like a thing. He did have he had a really cool gimmick. They actually just, I guess, because people were like actually advocating for it, because Canyon actually had a dark match or so as Mortis in WWE.
Yeah, I just saw that.
I saw that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Which it's like I don't know. That's a whole separate discussion, but it's like you really didn't understand Canyon or the Mortis gimmick. It's like you could have actually made money in the WWE with the Mortis character.
If you had pushed Mortis versus Undertaker could have had some legs to it. And I only saw a clip from that dark match, and even if I wanted to get on Canyon's back a little bit because they called him the innovator of offense, and he was basically sprinkling moves that other people did into his matches. He still was doing some like inventive stuff because, like that dark match, he throws the guy into the corner. The guy's like through the turnbuckles up against the post, and then he hops up on the top turnbuckle and Boston Crabs the guy in there. I'm like, never ever saw or even thought of that before. And I never, to be 100% honest, I don't remember seeing anybody ever doing
Look,
the flatliner.
I will defend him on certain things. Oh yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, like no one, like back Russian leg sweep, sure. Front Russian leg sweep, sure. But just flip one of them and make the flatliner out of it. I never saw anybody else do that. Like, I got to give the guy credit for.
Dennis Condrey did the face first.
Yeah, the front Russian leg sweep. Yeah. But like I said, you just take that one thing. They're both always facing the same direction, and you just flip one of them, and you have something I haven't seen anybody else do. What were you going to say, Matt? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. What I was going to say, I probably, I'm not a fan of his necessarily, but I will defend him on actions. But I don't feel the Undertaker is, for example, like the racist that people say he is. I don't I don't quite believe that. And
There's
as someone
no-
who's not,
Okay, yeah.
There's no evidence.
I'm not really a fan of his. I'm not really a fan of the Undertaker, so I'm not going to like defend him on like a lot of stuff. But I don't. People who just assume he's a racist because he will wear like a Blue Lives Matter shirt. It's like he's a dude from like Texas. It's like he's probably conservative. He probably wears that because that's like what his politics generally are. I don't know that just I'm wearing the shirt means like, oh, I hate black people.
The problem with
I don't perceive that.
The problem with
The
that
one thing I
is-
will say,
the problem with that is though, if you look at who his friends are, who he hangs out with, who he's historically worked with and had no problems with, who he speaks highly of, again, who his friends are, you can, if you try and say he's racist, you have no evidence of it whatsoever, like at all, like just
Well-
based on who he hangs out with, like.
I mean, this is probably a not popular thing to say, but it's like I think that there is far less evidence that Undertaker's a racist and far more evidence given how he books, how, you know, the guy who's currently the head honcho and booking WWE is probably has a bigger problem with minorities
Who
than the Undertaker
the mental
does. And I think
gymnastics
we
people
all know who I'm talking about.
the mental
Yeah.
gymnastics people do to like try and
Yeah.
just like minimize that. It really shows like
Yeah.
how
and,
much
and Undertaker will not be defended. This other person will be to their blue in the face,
Mhm.
but it's like
and they'll throw
I don't
shit
know about that.
and
But
they'll try and deflect blame off of him onto Vince. And I'm like, honestly, like I think you could make a strong argument that Vince is not racist.
Vince is, how can I best put this? Vince is a narcissistic sociopath that uses people and chews them up and spits them out and manipulates them.
mm,
I think he's too much of a weirdo for it to like cross. I think he's done racially insensitive stuff, but like when you really like hear people talk about Vince and stuff, and you really think about it, it's like I don't think it came from like a racist place. I think he's just a weirdo that doesn't like operate like a normal human being, and it just like is like a him thing, not like a racial thing. Because like I know because Hunter can't handle any sort of like valid PR question. He fumbled like such an easy question with the I don't see color thing, which for Triple H, like your track record
it was
doesn't
such
like if Vince had,
it was such a terrible answer.
if Vince had said that, I'd I think he would have gotten heat. But like if you really when you stopped and think about it, like yeah, like I kind of see what I kind of see that with Vince because Vince just sees green. But it's like when you're like Triple H is like no, like you can't like based on the things you've done throughout your career, like you have to give a little more than that.
To get not to make it like a defense of Vince because I think he is like a terrible person, but like Vince does actually have a longer and more successful like history of actually pushing African American and minority talent. So if he were to say something like, it's like I just see talent, it's like he would get heat for it, but it's also like, well, you actually have a track record of actually pushing African American or minority, but certainly African American talent. So you being like, well, I just see like it's like, well, you made The Rock like a big thing. You made even before that, like
Tony
Ahmed
Atlas,
Johnson,
like you can tell
Tony Atlas, Junkyard Dog. Like there's actually like there's several guys you can point to. And yeah, he did like wacky stuff like Saba Simba. It's like, what was that, dude? Like
he was
what's going on with that?
But he was it was stupid, but he was also he loves Tony Atlas. He was getting Tony Atlas a paycheck too.
Yeah, but you could also like you could point to him like, yeah, well, maybe this is not like this is an insensitive gimmick, but he actually did push African American talent. So if he said like, oh, I just see talent, it's like maybe, like that maybe it's insensitive, but like I can get it. Whereas, Triple H, when he says like, oh, I don't see color, I just see talent, it's like, but you haven't been booking African American talent. So you saying that, like you're then subconsciously you're kind of saying like, well, I don't see the African American talent that I have as worthy of like pushes. So it's like that you've actually made it somehow worse for yourself.
Well, it's such a cell phone though, because that question is so easy to say. It's just to be like, hey, like I know that perception's out there. Like we're working with some guys. We're just kind of in a between point. Like I'm new. I'm newer at this. I'm relying too much
If
on
the
guys. I'm
statement
comfortable.
had been, it's unfortunate that it comes across that way, and that's not my intent, and that never has been my intent, and it's not going to be. It's just kind of how things have worked out. That would be one thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be saying it's like, look,
Oh,
I
but
hate,
he said that literally within 12 months, less than that, really, but within 12 months of the company at least saying that the contracts that Tony Khan has given Mercedes Moné and Swerve Strickland, it's like, oh, we wouldn't have paid for that. Like, that's bad for the industry. Like, they're not worth that. It's like, oh, so two African, like, very popular African American talents that got paid quite well. Like you're coming out, your official position is like, oh, we wouldn't have paid that money for them. It's like,
And,
okay.
and they wouldn't
And they even
pay.
said that about
They wouldn't pay
he's not
Mercedes
operating.
what Liv Morgan was making. Liv Morgan, who hasn't drawn a dime in her life. They wouldn't pay
Yes.
Mercedes what she was
Oh,
making.
I forgot that aspect, but yeah.
Mercedes, who
Also
was
not he's not
outdrawing the Bloodline segments when that conversation happened.
yeah.
the only thing that I will say, um, oh God, don't lose your train of thought, moron.
Don't beat yourself up.
The only
Chad.
thing I would say is that if just to play devil's advocate, I'm not saying I buy this one way or another, but just to play devil's advocate for a second, the messy bad for the business thing, you could just straight up take that as we're sour grapes and we're bitching because we didn't sign those people, and would have done that with anybody. Just happened to be those. Like, I could see that absolutely being a possibility.
I think there wasn't. So I'm gonna be generous here. I'm gonna do my thing. I actually don't think their statement was because of their race. I think what happened is they didn't realize what the perception was, and it was they stepped on a rake that they didn't see coming. Like, I don't think it was because of Swerve's ethnicity, though he has said some things and there's complaints, but I think people's perception of that is wrong. But the problem that they ran into is when they should have been more careful with what they said, because they, like I said, it was a cell phone like that they walked right into. And Triple H also walked into a cell phone that he didn't have to, because the thing is, and I think what he doesn't understand, what they don't understand is, like, so it's gaining a lot of traction because there's a lot of smoke. Because I know the first time I said, like, what the fuck is going on, is like when they had that Mania match and they had like Bobby Lashley and the Street Profits in like a stable together, and I'm like, why are they in a stable together? It doesn't like make any sense for like what their gimmicks are and what their characters are. Well, and I know why, but that's the first time I was like, what the hell? Because like even like the Hurt Business, I said on the Discord, like I think the racial angle to that made it better, but you could have done that with any group of guys, because that was guys that didn't think they were getting a fair chance, like banding together under a charismatic leader and forcing the issue and like using their combined power to get those opportunities.
Yeah.
So this is slight vanity, but I will listen to episodes of the show that we've done. And Brad, you argued back in the day where you said like, oh, they couldn't wait to break up her business, and it's true. Like once a certain someone took over as booking, it's like they couldn't wait to break up her business, and it's like, this is dumb. Like the thing that got guys over, like outside of Lashley, who was booked well under Vince, like outside of that, it's like, what was Shelton Benjamin doing, or Cedric Alexander, or MVP? Like what were they doing?
But
they weren't doing anything.
That's a modern wrestling problem though, where like they have the breakup angle already written before guys even like wrestle their first match as a stable or a tag team. Like it's
I hate that so
yeah,
much.
that's what it came off to me. But like that's where I think that was kind of my, we can call it like black pill moment with Triple H and his booking of people, is when they teamed up, and I'm like, why are they together? Like it doesn't, like, why would those specific, I mean, other than, you know, what you mentioned, but I don't know what did you guys have individual moments where like your eyebrow like suddenly went up and you're like, this is kind of
I think it
wonky.
was. I would have to go back and look,
Some of the
but
stuff.
just kind of the. It was something that was just kind of a sneaking realization of like, hey, where is what what happened here? Like Bobby Lashley went from being on the show regularly to not being anywhere, and I'm like, what happened there? I don't understand. And
Yeah,
then I think Triple H still just bears a grudge against Shelton specifically because of that whole thing about like, if you don't want to move to SmackDown, you have to put Shelton over twice, and then he did, and then he made sure to bury him right after it. It's that's super cynical, and I think it's just he resents that that was
I
who it
mean,
was
he is
to.
a grudge holding bitch, so I wouldn't be shocked.
But
I think I think for me it was like the realization that it's like, oh, all the Latino acts are either in stables, the same stable or in two different stables, but they're just feuding with each other for weeks. And then it's like, well, okay, well, wait, what's the African American talent do? Oh, whether they're male or female, it's like, oh, they're all in the same stable too. What about the Asian? Oh, the Asian American talent is all in the same stable. What? It's like, oh,
yeah,
okay, this is like a pattern, but it's not even like a pattern that could be like scratch your chin. It's like, well, it's like no, it's like a pattern across the board.
It's once
like
you it's
And it's
once
like
you it's once you add like it's like
it's
you did what I did, where you see it once and then you start looking at the rest of the card, and like once you see it, like you can't unsee
can't
it.
unsee it. Yeah, you can't stop seeing it.
And then
And
Trish and
it's
Sarah were posting like stats about pay-per-views and stuff, and that's damning.
that yeah, that's where it's
yeah,
like that you can't and that's I think why they actually had an official response, because people on social media, because that's the thing, that's the joke about things, is that people always like people historically have talked about how like, oh, Tony Khan's like too online, whatever, and it's like, and maybe he is, but it's like you also have to realize like Tony Khan, before he ever decided to get into the wrestling business, back in the day, like probably like the early aughts, whatever, Tony Khan was a poster on the Death Valley Driver review board, message board. So it's like you're not gonna pardon my language, you're not gonna fucking get at Tony Khan. Tony Khan was back in the days of like flame wars on the message boards. Like he's gone through the crucible. He's been he's been forged by the fire of the flame wars from back in the day. But people talk about, oh, Tony Khan's too online. It's like it's been established and people have reported this. It's like that Triple H just like is like pouring through social media, like looking through like people's reactions and stuff like that. It's like clearly this is a guy who's got to, like, the
yeah,
fact that people like Trish and Sarah posted, it's like, oh, an actual like male African American talent, the last time they actually had like a notable, meaning like promoted match on a big pay-per-view show was like SummerSlam 2023, like over a year ago. And even then it was like a mid-card match. And before then it's like it wasn't even like this is a main event match. It's like mid-card, like over a year ago. It's like, yeah, all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, we understand,
yeah.
like there's like comments, like
Like
we understand the perception. It's like, yeah, because like social media has like ragged on it.
the
But that's like troubling too, because now it's like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna be like, oh, I guess Carmelo Hayes is gonna challenge Cody Rhodes for the title. It's like, are they gonna do that?
Yeah,
I don't know.
it
Maybe.
doesn't because it's just obvious once you do it that way. I think Tony Khan is too online too, but like sometimes people people get really upset sometimes. It's like Tony Khan's just like it shows like the normie culture I hate online, because there's times where Tony's just doing straight old school like trolling 101 and people just bite on it so hard, and it's like he's just because it's
Yeah.
so it's funny. So our news is so fucking stupid. So they reported this guy in one of the suburbs saying he saw a werewolf. And the second the guy opened his mouth, and I don't know if they were trying to be funny with it, but I think they thought he was being serious. And the second he opened his mouth, and I know they just did it because he was a redneck. The second he opened his mouth, like he's fucking with them. And they showed the ring cam video, and it's a guy in a leather jacket in a wolf mask doing the Bigfoot look over his shoulder thing. And I'm like, you idiots. Like, this guy is, and like, because I think they thought like, oh, we're going to show this guy's an idiot. But the second he opens his mouth, I'm like, oh, like this guy's just screwing with them.
He's trolling.
And they think because of his accent that he's
they think he's a rube because he's got an accent.
Yeah, but it was
well, he's the one like playing a gimmick on them, a trick on them.
I was gonna say I could think of one anomaly you were talking about earlier to the homogenous stables, and that was having Damian Priest in Judgment Day. Like, that's the only one I could think of.
Dom too was in there.
Okay, yeah, Damian, but that also predated Trips taking over.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, like, what was it that I'm trying to remember who it was. It might have been Crockett Crockett said, I can be a maintenance booker and keep things together for a little while, but I'm not a booker.
Yeah.
It feels like that a lot of current WWE stuff has just kind of been coasting on what's already there and not changing anything.
The problem,
but that's falling apart for them now.
Yeah.
Well, I think
it's gone on too long.
And I think the problem they have though is, and in this, because I'm going to defend Triple H on this point. I think the problem they're having now is they're a content mill. And so the problem with being a content mill is you got to fill that airtime. And like when people are bitching about like Bad Blood had all those run-ins, I'm like, well, yeah, it sucks and I don't want to see it. But like, you got to understand, if Triple H finishes a program, then you got to find something else out to do to fill that airtime. And it's like, yeah, like you can run something into the ground for 6 months or finish it in 3 months. But what are you going to do with those 3 months that you just, cut off, and like your fans are fine with it, it seems. So I think some of that's out of his control, because I think it does suck. Like, you have all that airtime to fill. And like, if you resolve stuff, then what are you going to do next?
But I think that's where like they were on borrowed time, and I think now the clock is starting to tick, because if you actually look, I mean, people like Dave Meltzer will defend them, but the Raw ratings and the SmackDown ratings have taken a nosedive. SmackDown, you'd be like, well, they moved from Fox to like USA, so it's like, yeah, it's going to be lower. But it's like, SmackDown rating, I think from this past Friday was like 1.5 maybe. And it's like, yeah, but SmackDown is like your big show because it has like Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns. Like, they're the focal point. And this was like, this was the go-home show right before Saturday's Bad Blood pay-per-view. So, and it was like 1.5.
So I have a theory.
So it's like, and that's a little lower than like Raw gets, because Raw gets like 1.6, which is also like kind of low.
Well, I think the problem is, so this is going to sound absolutely ridiculous, but it's what I thought when they signed that deal, is SmackDown's moved around over the years, but there's something about it being on USA that like just breaks people's brains. Because because
that's
it's never
where Raw's always been.
It's where Raw's always been. You always tune into USA on Monday, maybe Tuesday, but it's never been there. You've never been supposed to tune in on a Friday for it. Like, it's always been on some network channel or somewhere else. But there's something like, because even me, like when it's like, oh, it's on USA, like for some reason in my brain, like it could go anywhere else, and I've always been like, oh yeah, it's on this channel. But some reason it being on USA just like really screws with my head. I think it's because like you you like associate that with Raw so much. Like I think it would have been
Mm.
back in the day, like moving Nitro to TBS, like in 1997. Like I think the same thing would have happened because that's where you went to watch Saturday Night for like 20 something years.
Okay.
Because remember too, when Raw
But
left USA, like it kind of never recovered from that first leaving of USA. There's something about Raw and USA that just, I think, I don't know. That's my theory why SmackDown's doing bad. Like it was going to drop anyway, but it seems like it was extreme.
mm.
Unless the show has just gotten that unpopular, but being on network TV carried it. But it's just, it seems extreme for me.
And not that I like super police things, but I mean, not that long ago, like a few months ago, like, and Dave Meltzer was like, "Oh, like Raw, so like WWE is so hot, like they deserve to have like promotion of the year, like Triple H just Booker of the year." It's like, really, Dave? But for a Raw or a SmackDown, they'd easily do like 12,000 seats, easy. Like they'd sell 12,000. And now lately, it's like, let's say like 9,000, which it's
They
like,
were,
well, that's still really good. And it's like, it is. Yeah. But if you go in 6 months, let's say from 12,000 to 9,000, it's like that's a 25% drop.
they did that last year
And
and
if 9,000
they salvaged it by
with The
signing
Rock,
Punk and then going into, like, they did a really good job of like, they did a really good job of rebounding it with like Punk and Rock and Mania season, but like they've
maybe.
they started struggling last year, and I just think like I I don't know, like I love crapping on Triple H booking all the time, but part of me wonders how much of their getting hot attendance wise was the novelty of like live acts and like being able to go to stuff after COVID restrictions ended. And like if even if it was booked better, I wonder how much of it is just the novelty of a live event is wearing off for people and they're just kind of filtering back out. And like where you're seeing the decreases is where they're hitting markets again. And they're kind of like, oh yeah, I went last time. It was fun. I don't feel the need to go again. Like I wonder how much is it like kind of out of their control and was situational. Because I don't know about where you were, but like once like COVID restrictions, like and the vaccines were really taking effect, like you couldn't go to anything outdoor, anything indoor, like any kind of convention or anything was just insane for like 2 years. And like this year is like the first year that it's been kind of like normal attendance again. Oh, and what we were going to, so Matt was also going to mention that Taker isn't a racist, but he's a homophobe, which I agree with.
Oh, yeah, that we went like a digression for like 20, 30 minutes. But
Yeah.
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 I wouldn't say Taker's a racist. He is, I think, a homophobe, which played into him
Yeah,
not
that's true.
giving Canyon what he should have back in the
And
day.
even then, it's 20 years ago, so he might have changed. But there, if like that's always been my problem with Taker, though, is like I've always had a problem with people calling him a racist because it's like, well, no, there's no real evidence of him being a racist, but you could go after him for being a homophobe, but you won't
Yeah.
because you don't actually care. You just want to
Yeah.
go for the easy accusation.
It's like he is actually very problematic, just not in the way you're thinking, in a different way.
Yeah.
But are you going to make an issue of that? What were you
Yeah,
gonna say, Shad? I'm sorry.
there are things like you can have you can have a correlation between certain things, but that doesn't mean that it's true for everybody who does. If you make the statement everybody who does X is also Y, well, you're going to run into cases where there are some people who do X but are not Y, even though you've seen a lot of people who do X and are Y.
You mean people are complicated and nuanced, Shad?
Yeah, a little bit.
No,
And
that's impossible.
it's-
The internet told me that, like, if you believe one
Yeah.
thing, you're everything else.
Yeah, I know. It's yeah, I know. So if you want to bag on Taker, there's plenty to go after for it. Let's just not do it with assumptions. Let's go do it from demonstrable evidence. But
I
anyway,
have a problem with it though, and it's some of the stuff that like when people bring up stuff like Randy Orton did like 15 years ago. So it's like I don't like Randy Orton, but like could you bring up something that he did in like maybe after 2015 because like and I've said it before in like the Randy Orton thing, like if I got a bunch of success and money at a young age, I'd probably be an asshole like he was too. And
yeah,
he seems like he's grown out of it. But like the same thing with like the Taker thing, like I agree if you want to go after him for something, go after him for like the homophobia, but also remember that's 20 years ago. So maybe find something he's done in the last like let's just we'll be generous. Find something he's done in the last 10 years that would be worthy of bringing up, which he really hasn't done. So I mean like people can change like the Briscoes did.
yeah. The Briscoes absolutely did, and they worked hard to not only change but demonstrate that change as well. So
And we've
it can happen. It's well, lots of people aren't interested in it happening either.
And we've seen with a lot of those guys, though, that especially that era brought out the worst in everyone.
Mm,
Like, Kevin Nash, like Scott Hall, like a lot of those guys that even like were sabotaging each other, once it was all kind of behind them. Like even Steve Austin, like, I mean, he did some real shit that he doesn't
yeah,
get any heat for. But like, I just, you're traveling all the time, you're beat up, you're injured, you're taking, stuff for the pain and stuff. Like, yeah, he probably doesn't like gay people, but I also think, yeah, like he probably was his worst person in that era because of all that stuff and stress.
yeah. There's a lot that can roll into
Yeah.
that. So, all right,
But that
I
is it.
think I'm about tapped.
Yeah, me too. I kept looking at the clock like, oh, we need to shut our yaps. And okay, so if you're still with us, what we're doing next week, we're finishing January of 1992 USWA. And the week after that, for Halloween, we are watching the 1994 Crow movie with Brandon Lee, a timeless classic. Have both of you seen that movie?
I've seen it, but I've seen it multiple times actually, but it's been a few years.
Yeah,
Many
it's been
years,
a few
actually.
years for me. So we'll see how Shad likes it since we're gonna torture him with new movies. But remember, Shad, this is where Crow Sting was born from, so you
I
can at
know,
least enjoy
I know.
that aspect.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll see what happens.
so that is what our next 2 weeks are looking like. That's the schedule we're gonna stick to, and then I think we'll go from there because I think we're gonna start hitting the holiday season, so we're gonna have to start doing some stuff because the delightful thing about doing this live is we can't double record like we used to back in the day.
Yeah, it makes it a little more complicated.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us always. I need to hit the right button or I'm going to like make this really awkward for the stream. But this has been the 4 Corners podcast. We've been in 3. Craigbot doesn't count. You've been in the